representing forestry, and I'm a faculty member in extension at the University of Vermont.
Rosalind Renfrew, Wildlife Diversity Program Manager with Fish and Wildlife.
Rich Langdon, Chair of Fish SAG.
Let's see, we go around online. Savannah.
Hi, I'm Savannah Ferrer. I'm a forest health specialist with FPR, and I'm here representing the fungal SAG.
Noel.
Noel Dodge, wildlife biologist, Vermont Fish and Wildlife, regulatory review.
Stephanie.
Stephanie Smith with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm Anson, Secretary Tebbett's designee on this committee. Thank you.
Kent.
Ken McFarland, he, him. I'm the chair for the invertebrate SAG group.
Kylie.
Yeah, Kylie Briggs. I'm the director of conservation for a nonprofit called the Orion Society, and I'm a member of the Reptile and Amphibian SAG, filling in for Jim, who couldn't make it here today.
Carla.
Good morning, everyone. Carla Fenner. I'm an Endangered Species Committee member representing Florida. I work for VHB doing environmental consulting, and sorry to be remote today. I'm on the road, but glad to see everyone.
Matt.
Good morning, everyone. Matt Peters here. I'm ESC member and chair of the Flora SAG and member of the Bryophyte SAG as well. I'm an independent botanist and ecologist, and also sorry to be remote here today. I probably won't be able to be here for the full meeting, but glad to join in for a bit.
Thanks, Matt. And Jed.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Jed Murdoch. I'm the chair of the Mammal SAG, also a faculty member in the Wildlife and Fisheries Biology program at UVM. Good to be here.
Great. Well, given the room we're in, it's actually not a bad thing that many of you are online today. Not have fit everyone in the current room. So great. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I don't think we've got anyone from the public here, but I'll just ask any comments from the public that aren't related to today's agenda. Okay, moving on. So additions, deletions, or changes to the agenda. I have, Savannah has submitted some names for new members to the fungal SAG. I sent those out in an email. I did sort of make the agenda change on our Teams page, but I didn't send anything out online. I guess if we can pull it off, I'd just like to maybe squeeze those in before lunch. Jed has some suggestions for new additions to the Mammal SAG, and I'd like to just kind of continue rolling with new SAG members just before lunch, if that works for everyone. We're a little bit behind schedule, but Noel, I just wanted to check in with you. You're good until 10, is that right?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Okay, perfect. So hopefully we can get that conversation rolling around incidental take permits and some of the work that you do around that before you have got to check out. Any other changes, additions, deletions? Okay, great. So we've got the 17 April 2024 minutes to approve. They're online. Hopefully folks had a chance to look at those with the link in the agenda. Any comments or well, I guess I should say a motion to approve.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve.
Thanks, Ally. Thank you, Paul.
There's one minor edit. I had the wrong date for today's meeting.
Oh, okay.
I had September 3rd instead of 4th, so I'll correct that.
All right. Anything else? All right. All those in favor of approving the April 17 minutes signify by saying aye.
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 Great. Any opposed? Abstentions? Okay, great. Thanks so much. Okay, Commissioner, I will turn it over to you for some updates from Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department.
Sure. Do you want to go first and then I'll...
I was just really here to introduce myself. I don't
Okay.
have anything to share really.
Okay. I'll start with some good news. Yesterday, Roz and I went to Camp Johnson and met with, about 50 people, it seemed like, in a room about this big. But most importantly, with their environmental folks to talk about management of the grassland area that they have. Two things, and I'll ask Ross to weigh in here. I was happily surprised, and I should have been surprised, but they're already doing some really good work.
Oh, good, good, good.
And so that was encouraging. And what was further encouraging is their commitment to work with Ross, and they're in the middle of their management plan development, which aligns with some of our work. And so I think Roz is going to consult on that as well with them. They even went so far as, and this is getting way out and truly in the weeds, talked about burning and managing it in a way. And so I think it was super positive. It's for the grasshopper sparrows. I should have said that at the front end of this. There aren't a huge number, but so we're pretty excited about that. And Roz, do you please add?
Well, like the commissioner said, it just happened yesterday, and it seemed really positive. They are, DOD, I've worked with them in the past, and they're excellent at following through when they're going to do something. They've already dedicated that one field, the open field, to grasshopper sparrow management in the past. Audubon's been conducting surveys there over the years, but there is a need for some management because of it's just getting kind of rank after years and years of just mowing once a year. And so they're completely up for doing what's needed to get it back into shape, the areas that are rank. And it's something that I want to involve some of the bird SAG members in figuring out best course of action. But I'm excited that they're willing to burn, because I think that's going to really be helpful. And usually it is not an option in Vermont. And so that's exciting to me.
What's the population size there?
Well, so we get a maximum count from those surveys, but they include fledglings often, I think. And so what I can tell, and Mark, tell me if you agree, it seems like there's 3 territories there essentially consistently. And I think there used to be at least a couple more. So I think we can at least get back to numbers that were there prior.
Yeah, the bed just changed. In the past, they've landed helicopters there when they couldn't land helicopters in other places. That was maybe a decade ago. We had talked with, was Mike O'Hara?
Yeah, he's the person we'll be working with.
We spoke with him back when Michelle Patnode was doing the surveys. And he seemed very eager, and I think they put up some signage, so that's great that they're moving forward with that.
They don't land helicopters in that particular space any longer.
Okay.
They do hover 50 to 100 feet.
Yeah.
But they land just west where it's mowed right down.
Okay.
So they are doing, the only activity in the area is there's a mile track that they use for PT, which
it makes for surveying. I've only surveyed. It makes for surveying really easy. You just walk along the track, people stop and ask you questions, and well, that's great. That's great to hear, because I know well, Michelle handed it off to Allie Wagner, and she's been talking. There's been a slight dip, but I think a lot of that is due to the vegetation kind of getting to the point where the grasshopper sparrows just don't like it.
So it's an area, we roughed it out on Google Earth yesterday. It's about 30 acres.
Okay. And that's pretty much the second largest concentration of grasshoppers.
It is now, yeah.
Behind
Franklin
County Airport.
Right.
So great. That's awesome. That's awesome. I know that there's
And Mike O'Hara he was totally.
He's great.
Yeah, he was great when we were there. It was a long time ago, but.
And I've known Mike for 25 years.
Okay.
When he used to be on the fire department up in the islands. He likes to burn things, so he's on our team on this one.
Good.
So, so we're looking forward to that.
Fire's not something we normally use in Vermont as a management tool.
So he does it a lot.
Oh, he does
Yeah.
He
They do
burns
it.
up at the range.
Mhm.
Oh,
um,
okay,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
And he thinks there might be some sparrows up there too, but
So Ethan Allen had some a number of years ago. We haven't surveyed that in a while. I'm trying to think, Alan Thompson's brother was the forester.
Keith.
Thompson.
No, not Keith. I went out with Alan Thompson, but in order to get out there, you know, you have to contact and
Oh,
make
yeah.
sure, and because it's in an area where they do active firing, and that's maybe one of the reasons, you know, they get machines out there and stuff like that. We haven't reported any there in a while, but we haven't really, nobody's been out there in a while. I went out there once with Alan and we didn't find them a year after they had been located.
My understanding with that is that whether they're there or not, it would be good to know, but also it sort of is what it is in terms of how they use it.
Yeah.
There isn't like an ability to work with them on doing things differently. So it, but I don't know, grasshopper sparrows tend to like bombing ranges.
Yeah, no, I mean, habitat, you know, you're out there surveying, you see these little pop-up, you know, individuals that they can fire at when they're sitting there, and you know, they drive machines around, so, you know, I guess it's Fort
Sparrows.
that's a great spot for some of those species that
Mhm.
like to serve habitat, yeah.
maybe we should bomb some of the land near the airport.
Yeah, there you go.
They've been burning at Camp Johnson for oak habitat.
For oaks,
It's fire,
yeah.
Yeah,
actually, so they've
Yeah.
already been.
he said they burned the pines.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they get a lot of complaints though.
Yeah. and-
Because the
and-
ash was
yeah,
landing on the trailers.
Yeah.
They also have incidental fires pretty often, not large ones, but
Yeah.
from the tracer rounds and ignitions. They usually will cook off fires that they contain.
Can we quote you on that comment about bombing the airport?
I think it's being recorded.
Yeah.
It's not the worst thing I've said. So let's talk about the airport a little bit. I wish I had as much good news to report as I do about Camp Johnson. So, one of the wrenches that's been thrown into the gears here is the FAA. I just received, I think it was yesterday. Yes, today's Wednesday, right?
Yeah.
The Monday threw me off. Their comments on the MOU with AOT and a perusal. What it shows to me is we should have been in the room with a FAA and not allow is not the right word. I don't think AOT can represent and answer the questions in the best manner. And so we're efforting that. In fact, I have a phone call at 11:30 with Michelle Boomhauer today to maybe orchestrate that. And I know the secretary is going to talk to Joe Flynn about it as well. And so it's just one more hurdle, but we're trying to work our way through that. And I can't give you the granularity on the comments. I just haven't had the time to get through it and report out as well as I could. But I certainly can at some point down the road. But I think what needs to happen is we need AOT, FAA, and RAWs and folks in the room. And so when they raise an issue or an issue comes up, they don't just go, okay, and write it down as an issue. We can say, no, that's not how to look at this.
Yeah.
That hasn't happened. And so I feel like that's a missed opportunity, but we can't go back in time. And so we're going to push forward for that.
Okay.
Not great news. But like we'll continue to push and do our best.
Roz, does it look like any management is gonna happen this fall?
Mm-mm.
No? Okay. Mhm.
We're still waiting on the plan. itself.
Okay. Is the MOU that you're talking about essentially incorporate some of the plans for habitat?
In a general sense.
Yeah,
and we're
okay.
waiting for the plan
Yeah.
and more specific.
Right,
to
okay.
how
Is
we're
that with
gonna do it.
V-Trans then? Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's maybe off the record, I'll ask the National Guard to sit down with AOT.
There you go. Be so much easier.
Yeah.
Teach them how it's done.
Yeah. Exactly.
And then I know, John, you reporting later, but I don't know if you wanted to update on where we are in, with the swap.
The act,
Is that on the agenda for later?
It's not,
Okay,
but yeah,
so
go
would
for
that
it.
be
Yeah,
appropriate?
yeah.
action plan was sort of, planned for, had a summer hiatus so people could do their field work, this time of year. We're gonna use that time to reach out to partners and send them a survey and a draft list of species of greatest conservation need. Due to a variety of issues, we're hopefully gonna send that survey and the list out, this week. We've been refining the survey, it took a while it's amazing how you can send data out to various staff and or others and say like, here's the constraints you have to follow and get 8 different, ways in which the data can be organized and disorganized. So it took a while to pull all that back together. It's all set. We're gonna send that out. My hope is that come mid-October, the teams will re-engage, perhaps with a few additional outside partners on each of the teams. And they'll spend the winter working on better identifying threats and actions needed for the various species of greatest conservation need. We'll have a draft action plan out in early spring. And for public review, and then use the summer to receive that feedback, update the plan as needed, and submit it in September of next year.
Thanks, John.
Aside from that, and some craziness with getting our agency of digital services to help us with the database, everything is just gonna go smoothly.
John, let me just ask the question because I think you have most of the SAGs represented here. Do you have any specific messages you would like to pass on to SAG chairs?
One is just thank you for your help in getting the SAG members and SAG chairs were a big help on each of the taxonomic teams. And I really appreciate the time they put into this. We're going to be asking for some more of your help this fall and winter, but hopefully, because we're basing this a lot on the previous action plans and the previous ones served us fairly well. I don't think there's be a lot of big changes except for any new species that might have been added. And that's been, except for the fish world has been, and the invertebrates, that's been fairly concerning. But, and then our hope is to focus the action plan more through the lens of Vermont conservation design and really emphasize the need for, healthy connected landscapes are the most important thing for most wildlife and plants. And then stepping down from there will be the individual actions needed for species. And of course, I recognize that the Endangered Species Committee's role is really focused on many of those things that fall through all the cracks, all the coarse filters. So we're not going to ignore the needs of the individual needs of various species, but we want to try and hopefully convince the public and people that are thinking more sort of habitat or landscape based. Let's work on that piece, and get that done so that it's easier to do the species by species work that we might need to do.
Well, our SAG bird meeting is first week of October, somewhere like that. Will we have information available to relate to them at that time?
I hope so.
Okay. And I guess my next question, would you be able to attend or somebody from the state to maybe better explain that? Or should I just consult with you and then pass information along?
I'll be happy to attend.
Okay,
I'll
great.
be at a state that first week, but
yeah, we'll figure something out. Okay.
Internet's the be there.
Yeah.
At the what?
Okay, great.
If, I don't know yet. Yeah, Jill goes, so I go when as needed.
Oh, yeah, Ross could potentially do that too. Most of the people that are going to contribute to the thing are SAG members already. And so But if the information is pretty straightforward, I can certainly relate it, or we can, I can't remember what exact date. It's usually the first Tuesday.
The other thing I guess let me say one thing, Jed, I'll pass it over to you. One of the things that we've talked about in here, we've never really had that much traction on it, but one of the things that has been intriguing to me is the information on the associations with threatened and endangered species and natural communities, which is in one of the many chapters of the action plan. And to me, it seemed like if we're thinking longer term about recovery plans, it is, it's kind of an impossible task to just go through species by species, especially because some of these recovery plans are ginormous. And so thinking about whether we might think about suites of species that are associated with natural communities might be a way where we could actually think about a suite of species associated with, whatever it might be, riparian forests or something along those lines. So I would love to have the SAGs just take a look at that section of the plan as well as you're going through some of the work that you're doing on species specific threats and management actions, because I think there's some ways that we could move forward and do some good things for suites of species as well. So I'd love to see some SAG input on that, just if nothing else, to just kind of double check species lists and natural community associations.
Yeah, well, that was kind of Steve Perrin's thinking when we attempted the first grassland bird recovery plan,
Exactly.
right? To kind of capture them all. So and that thing wasn't perfect for sure, but I think that would be a great way to approach it.
Yeah. Okay. Jed, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. This is just a question for maybe some guidance and clarification. We do have 2 extinct species that are in our mammals section. Should we be assessing extinct species in the state? So I'm referring to mountain lion and wolf. We had a debate about this. We're not really sure. It's in there. We can do it, right? But how far back do we go if we're going to start including other extinct species, right?
Good point.
Yeah.
It's a good question. We've batted that one around ourselves.
So I'll say, in the past, it was decided to include everything that was on our natural heritage program species list. So Lake April char is not on it. It extirpated, 100-something years ago. The extent to which one, and the mammal team at the time in 2005 and 2015 decided to keep the wolf and mountain lion on the list. We don't have a specific requirement to exclude or criteria that excludes extirpated species. Perhaps if they were actually deemed extinct, it might be different. We can change that. You get a lot of public interest in having the species. The need to act on that information when we get $300-something thousand a year in state wildlife grant funds, and we have 1,000 species of greatest conservation need that are here, is another helps us prioritize where we're spending money.
This brings up other questions too about like a species like Henslow sparrow, which is on our list, but we're not going to be doing anything to manage for it. We haven't seen one in several decades. We do want it protected if one happens to show up. But is there another way to capture that in sort of an emergency provision or something like that for those kinds of species? And so I think they're somewhat related. And I think it would just be important to be, whatever we do, to be consistent across the taxa.
Well, looking at it, as Al said, from a natural communities perspective, maybe that's one way to kind of pick. For instance, Henslow sparrow could fit in a shrub. I don't know where it would fit in the scope of things, but and we've always kept it on the the list primarily for that reason. What happens if it pops up?
Mhm.
Which as bird species, they can do.
Well, plants, that
Right.
does happen, right?
Yeah, I
I
was
mean,
gonna
we've
say.
seen plants that
Yeah,
haven't been around for 100 years show up, so.
happens a little more frequently with plants.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe a discussion we should have internally and come back. A recommendation.
I mean, I'm curious what the the wisdom of the mammal sag is about those two species in particular. I
Mhm.
mean, I think I look at those two species perhaps a little differently than, say, Henslow sparrow or rare plants, because from everything that we know about the home range requirements of those species, the current distribution, the genetic composition, it's highly unlikely that they'll ever have a breeding population in this state or even in this general region. So, yeah, it seems fine to me to leave them in the action plan, but I sure hesitate to invest a whole lot of time and resources in thinking about their recovery when there's so many other pressing needs that actually stand a chance of success versus those two species, which from all the science that we have, it's highly unlikely that they will occur or have a population. I mean, they may occur from time to time, errant individuals. We actually have been collecting genetic data or tissue samples for a genetic database from coyotes in Vermont to contribute to the regional database. Recent results have indicated zero wolf DNA in all of the samples that have been provided.
If they're included, are we implying something?
Well,
That
they've
maybe
been
we
included
don't want
since the
to.
original action plan, but I think maybe, I don't recall how they're treated in a very general way in the action plan right now. Simply referenced that they're extirpated, they did exist in this part of the world some time ago. I mean, frankly, the landscape conservation work that we do today, to the extent that they ever were in need of conservation attention, is what we would want to do anyway.
Right.
And, we're at the forefront of landscape conservation efforts as it is, so I don't know what else we would do other than.
The way we pitched the action plan since 2003, when we started on developing them, was that it was a plan for all people and organizations interested in conservation, not just where the Fish and Wildlife Department will spend its money. That there would be actions in there that many people can pick up, and that we weren't saying we were going to do any of them or all of them. And yeah, whenever I get calls or contacts from people saying, more wolves, more, mountain lions will save us from deer, I just respond with, help us with landscape conservation, help us improve connectivity. And, that's the most cost-effective way to make Vermont that would be amenable to support it, or that could support mountain. But anything beyond that was just too much of a demand. Even the budget just to do public outreach around it would crush any program.
I don't know, Jen, if that helps answer your question. I think those are some good framings, and I guess I would also say don't spend a lot of time on wolves and catamounts, mountain lions.
Yeah, no, that's very helpful, and thank you. I think we'll probably include them, but maybe add somewhat of a preamble to our statement about why we're including them and that they're extinct. Yeah, and take it from there. So thanks everybody for your comments. Appreciate that.
And then I also want to update folks that Alan and John and Roz, myself, Jamie Fidel, and Representative Larry Sakowitz and Hannah Smith, our general counsel, have been meeting to develop legislation around endangered species protection. And we have a meeting coming up to finalize where we're going. But I think it's fair to say that it's going to reflect a lot of what we proposed last year that no action was taken on. And there may be other elements as well. And I think it's important that we have the key players in the room ahead of time developing these recommendations. So that should they get proposed and moved, we can present a united front, if you will, in the legislature. And I think it'll be good to have various voices. And we can say, yes, we work together on developing this. And so I think our meeting is this week. Tomorrow. I'm sorry, I just get lost with days.
Oh, yeah.
And we have a day off because, so more to come on that, but I think I'm actually excited about the work that we've been doing together. I don't know if you want to add to that any.
I actually put it on the agenda just to do a
Oh,
little
all
bit
right.
of brainstorming about it. So we'll talk about it
Okay,
in a
great.
bit. So yeah, just to see if the committee and SAG chairs have got some ideas. And we can kind of recap what the bill was and where we might be going. So.
And then just generally, for everyone's awareness, we're in the middle of, we're on the cusp of being in the middle of developing our budget, both capital and general fund requests for next year. Very preliminary work going on right now, as well as any policy recommendations we might have to push forward. Just so you understand the process, my leadership team has met. We're gonna cull and refine, and then I'll meet with the secretary and the deputy secretary. And will that make it through? We'll go up to the 5th floor, and some of those might make, some won't. And then we'll spend time writing the actual legislative language and figuring out our strategy, getting sponsors and so forth. It's very early. I don't have anything to report on specifics at this point, except there are 18 policy recommendations for just the Department of Fish and Wildlife on the table. I doubt we'll get 18 moved through.
Those were your recommendations, though, not others that are going to affect you.
When you say mine, you mean the
Come
department?
internally, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
correct. Each of
right.
the division directors worked with their staff
Mhm,
and then brought them. We had a leadership meeting and they were presented there.
mhm.
And so I'll meet with each of the directors individually and refine that. And who knows what people are going to do to us or try to do to us. I don't think they'll forecast that for us. I do think it's important to know Larry Sakowitz's involvement. We've invested a lot of time and effort with him. Roz spent a day with him in the field. John and I and Tyler, our beaver baffle specialist, we spent a day up in Alberg installing the beaver baffle for his. It needed to be done, but we brought him along so he'd understand. And it was a great conversation he had with Tyler, understanding that sometimes you can and sometimes you can't put a baffle in, and the value of trapping. And I think we dispelled some myths with him, but he's been engaged in a really positive way, and I'm happy about that. And if you want to add to that, because you've done a lot of work with him as well.
Well, look to you, Roz, because you spent a fair bit of time with him, and a number of your staff have gone out in the field with,
Mhm.
in addition to other representatives, which has been a terrific opportunity for us, and I really appreciate your support with that, Commissioner, because it's given us an opportunity to reshape the perspective of some of these legislators after a few years of sort of contentious debates in the State House over issues related to trapping and hunting. So hoping maybe that opens up some opportunities for some more productive, progressive conversations in the legislature moving forward. But I just want to say anything about the time in the field.
Oh, well, we had a great time in the field. I think Representative Sakowitz is really interested in all we do, not just, what he was focused on initially. And he's very humble about it and very eager to learn and very interested in promoting anything that's going to help biodiversity in Vermont. And so I think now he probably has a much better understanding of fish and wildlife and continues to just make himself completely available for anything that we're offering up so that he gets to know our interests and our work and the staff themselves. So you know, we're really lucky to have someone like that who kind of wants to make that his thing in the legislature. And he's, like the commissioner said, he's at the table with us on looking at the endangered species statutes. And he's really just listening a lot. He's doing a lot of listening. And he's very humble that way. And so I think it'll be great that if he's able to pass everything he's learning on to his colleagues in the committee and see what we can do.
I think that he's an example of the overall strategy, which is to meet with legislators outside of a committee room, because there's a certain thing that happens in that room where they know they're being recorded and broadcast. And they may not ask the question that would be seemingly indicate they don't know something, but when you like in this, you make it friendly and collegial, boy, it's amazing what they're willing to ask and say. And so we've broken down some barriers. And so we're going to work with other folks. We're going to keep doing that. And I think it's in the best interest of the department. I think they get a better understanding of what we actually do on a day-to-day basis, that it's way more than just hunting and fishing.
Yeah. They ever want a boat ride up to the Turtle Island?
Yeah.
More than
He'd probably love to.
Yeah, take some staff out with him and we can take him out to for Buzz on the Lake.
And I think that's a great point. If anybody has any suggestions, and you know a legislator who would be interested, let us know. And I mean, to show that both the department is interested in hearing and showing, but engaged with you all.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Great.
I want to make sure we give Noel a little bit of time. So just a quick budget question. I was kind of curious how you have been doing on the match side for being able to use federal dollars.
We do pretty well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I don't know, Roz, you have not been as aggressive as Steve used to be in terms of getting a match from us.
She's been really nice.
Yeah.
She's been really nice.
But feel free to.
You shouldn't have said that, because now I'm gonna step it up.
That's good. I have it on my list of things to do and it just seems to get pushed to the list.
Yeah.
Yeah, my approach was to provide the online option in order to make it easier for you all. And instead of cracking the whip, to be like, here, look how easy this can be now.
Feel free to crack the whip.
Yeah.
No, it's always a thing. We always need more. It's always beneficial. We do all right with birds because of our work with Audubon and VCE. They're kind of obligated to bring in a certain amount that covers a lot of it. So that's huge. Our partners are huge. But also ESC hours. I haven't been so great at collecting those probably. I think I've pinged people a few times, but it's hard to follow up on. And sometimes I think we ought to go back to the paper. Because then you just hand them out right here.
Right here.
Yeah. For these kinds of things. Yeah, for volunteers, the online's great because they're doing their thing out in the field and they're, you know.
Yeah, you can capture this.
Yeah, because I would fill it out before I left, you know, that's
Although you could just be on your phone.
I know. I'm old school, Roz. I'm old school. I like paper.
Yeah.
I make my list every week on a piece of notepad.
Okay, well, thanks for that. I'm gonna move on. One of the conversations that's come up as we've been talking to Representative Saktowicz is the timing around incidental take permits. And one of the things that came up that I thought might be useful to get a perspective here is the work that, I mean, both John and Noel do, but kind of what happens in terms of, I've got it in quotes here, negotiations with applicants before a permit is is actually submitted or an application is submitted. So I think, Noel, I didn't leave you much time here, but I'm wondering if you'd be willing to just talk a little bit about some of the work that you do in terms of like getting a project, sort of massaged to the point where it can actually go on an application form and be something that Fish and Wildlife can start to work with.
Sure. Yeah. Don't worry about the time. I actually, I can go past 10. It's not a big deal. And I was working while you are talking, so maximizing efficiency here. Yeah, I mean, I can just broadly speak to that. It speaks a little bit to our desire to have good guidance that really outlines exactly what we need. Working early and often, Carla is here on the call as a consultant. She interacts with us quite a bit in that respect. It somewhat depends on the developer. When we hear about projects, is it before they start submitting applications to the PUC or Act 250, and we have time to make, adjustments to projects, or do we see it and they've already spent 2 years nailing down every single detail and they can't change anything? Those are two very different starting places when, I receive notification of a project to start reviewing it. We're reviewing a lot of projects. I was just digging for numbers from the last year, but it's close to 400 project reviews a year that we're looking at, and there's at least 250 some years that have some resource concern, and that could be any of the resources that I review for. So rare plants, rare animals, natural communities, necessary wildlife habitat, deer yards, grassland bird habitat, pretty much you name it. If that pops up in our review, we're looking for more details. So as far as Act 250 permitting goes, it really is a game of, do we have a record already that we know is there? And then does this project somehow pose a threat of take? And so the harm, harass language in the endangered species take rule is really what pushes a lot of it. It's not so much that it's going to be a direct take, but it's doing something in the habitat that is going to push these animals out or impact these plants in some way. Clearing all the trees around a rare plant that's a forest specialist needs some shade. That's going to have a bigger impact, and that ends up going into permitting. But sometimes we don't know if the species are there, so we're requiring surveys as best we can, robust surveys from consultants, so that we have the information in the permit process to know whether we're going to need to direct applicants to the T&E take permits. The more we do, the more we run into, we had Fowler's toad come up in the last, it's been now 2 years. That was kind of a new one. We navigated that. We've actually got some acoustic guidance now, so that the idea is that we can have enough information to direct applicants toward a take permit that's actually filled out effectively and meets, has enough information that the SAGs can make decisions on them. That's a real broad answer because, these projects are all over the state, all different habitats, different species, different impacts. Sometimes they don't have impact. So it's hard to really speak specifically to a type of project without a specific question. Does that help at all?
Yeah, it does. And I think, when you're talking about that variation, I think the thing that has come up for us, and, again, it's been on, with some applications and not with others, is we get emergency email from John Cart, or we get a, fine to wait till your next ESC meeting. And so, part of, I think, the conversation we want to have is really, how can we do this in a way that doesn't, I don't want to, just speak for the ESC, but, given that we're all volunteers, doesn't do it in a way where we can't really give the, the input that we think is necessary. So that's just, I think where I'm coming from is really trying to figure out how could this be done in a way that allows everybody to give the input and the the attention that these permits actually deserve.
Yeah, I think just To speak to that, it takes time and repeated experience with some of these. I'm just thinking of Meadowlark in particular. We have grassland bird guidance that was published before Meadowlark was listed, and then Meadowlark was listed. And so now we have these guidance that don't quite align with that species well. And really it's the development and consulting communities that it's a new thing to them. And so there's a lot of, rust to break off and sort of wheels to grease to make things move a little smoother and happen before we get into a position where the project needs a response from the ESC or this, do we need a permit, comes in last minute. We're working to try and make that not happen very often, but again, it's often a novel species. Fowler's toad was one we hadn't run into, and then we had a transmission line project that went right through one of the only known EOs that we have for the species, and we had to scramble to figure out, okay, this is a linear project. Like, what can we do to make this permittable, essentially? So we're working toward that. It's not a great situation to be in to have, emergency requests go out for review. I would like to avoid that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll say, I think Noel and the folks working with him really do a great job of it, but some developers just wait till the last minute and then they say, oh my God, you're gonna cost whatever. You're gonna delay the project. It's gonna be awful for Vermont's economy. And, and they leave us in a bind. Noel's group in a bind and you guys in a bind. I think in the bigger picture, that their work on Act 250 and Section 248, which is Section 248 covers plants as well and more broadly. That it's reduced the number of permits that would be coming to you guys because they were able to work out and negotiate things with the developer to completely avoid taking. But it just, but there's still always the folks who just aren't playing cooperatively and leave us all in a bind.
Or start the project before getting a permit.
What? What? Thank you. It never worked.
One, again, one question I have, and I have no idea what the avenue would be for this, but kind of curious if you all have ever done any outreach to the development community broadly. Like, I don't know if there's any, sort of trade organizations or groups in Vermont that would be, just like call us before, I mean, the what you're talking about in terms of the, perhaps for a developer, the worst case scenario is they're ready, they've got, whatever, they've got earth moving equipment out and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we need a, X, Y, or Z permit. And just sort of wondering, not to say, hey, we're friendly and we'll, approve everything, but actually to say, hey, if you start with us in advance, this is going to make your planning process much easier.
Well, Noel should.
Noel should speak to that.
But we have done that over the years. We've given presentations to groups of consultants, because the consultants are like the main liaison for us to reach the larger regulated community. But the consulting world, or the cast of consultants changes from time to time. So we've got to sort of figure out how to keep the awareness level up as people come and go.
Right, but that is their job, though, too, is to be
Indeed.
up to date with all of that stuff.
Right.
They're not doing their job well.
Yeah. So we try to make information available on the website, and Noel and company give presentations to the Natural Resources Board and other parts of the regulatory system so that they're aware and they can inform consultants and developers. So
there's only so much you can do.
Yeah, because I would imagine there's some folks that game the system and just say, we're gonna blast through this and get to the point where they can say no. You know, or it makes it a very difficult last minute decision to, you know, we already have our equipment out on the thing, we're ready to go, you know, or we didn't.
Sorry about
and they knew kind of all along that they should take it.
It does happen. I think at this stage of the game, that's infrequent, but
Oh,
it does.
Okay, good to hear.
I don't know, Noel, you should share your perspective on this and how we address awareness building on the part of the regulated community.
Yeah, you covered it well to begin with, John. I'm going to say that the same word I repeat quite a bit. It's a capacity issue. It takes a lot of time to build presentations and slate that time. A couple quick examples. Andy and I did a presentation on Bicknell's thrush to Sugarbush to their entire staff. They do a training day, and I think we got cycled through over 100 people in one day. We gave the same presentation 5 times. We try to do that when we can and when it's helpful and when it's effective. If we can reach a lot of people, then that's useful. If we're, contacting 4 people, that's not a really effective use of our time. Alyssa also does it with bats. Since all of our tree bats are so imperiled, she's done several consultant training sessions in order to get people, up to speed, up to our snuff for doing, roost tree inspections or emergence surveys, et cetera. And the other one I was thinking of, besides the NRB, what's up?
No,
You're good. You're good.
Okay. Besides the Natural Resources Board, when we do updates to guidance, we try to make sure the Natural Resources Board gets an audience with us, and we give a presentation on where we're coming from and what the guidance mean for their permits. We also do that. I did it for grassland birds with the first round of the grassland guidance for consultants. We invited as many as we could. Again, it's a timing thing. It's hard to find that time to carve out, but we do that. The Ski Areas Association is another one because we run into a lot of more natural, bear habitat issues and natural resource issues than T&E species. But that's another big group where we can get ski areas and the people who manage them on the same page with best practices, and then when they come in for permits, they already know what we're going to be asking for. So.
And to Noel's point about capacity, you've heard me, you've heard my broken record stump speech about this before, but we do not receive any money from any of the permitting processes that we provide technical support to. And so it's, our biologists who have a lot of responsibilities, taking on the added responsibility of providing that technical support to the Act 50 permit process, the public utility permit process, all of the various state and federal permitting processes that we're part of. And so to the capacity point that Noel was making, I mean, it would be great if we had more capacity to do more outreach and awareness building. We could be creating and updating guidance documents on a more regular basis. But it takes a lot of time, and meanwhile, the meat grinder of the permit process never stops, and so that's where their effort has to go. It's day after day after day, constantly working with the regulated community to guard against impacts to important resources.
Carla, were you going to add something?
Oh yeah, just to sort of chime in, and I won't pretend to speak for the entire consulting community, but just in my own experience working with Noel and others in the department over the years on Act 250, Section 248, and the collateral takings and other state and federal permits. The timing is funky and unique project to project, and where in the annual cycle of field season and sort of report writing and permitting season any project falls. And on kind of the short end of the timeline, a smaller project might only be a few months between sort of conceptual all the way up through a permit submittal, and then on the longer end, it's multiple years and multiple rounds of sort of agency and consultation with Noel as project plans get revised. And sort of in thinking about from a project development and permitting perspective, there might be a Section 248 petition followed by the collateral permit submittals like stormwater and takings and everything else a given project might need. And so just kind of recognizing that there's sort of multiple pre-application conversations happening concurrently, but then the actual permit submittal might actually be sequential with sort of the overarching Act 250 or Section 248 first, followed by collaterals, and then sometimes reverse order. And just that, and something that I've bumped into a number of times is that, that arc of the permitting schedule doesn't necessarily have, say, the SAG meeting timeline or the ESC meeting timeline in mind, right? They're looking at any other number of issues. And so to make the pre-application consultation and sort of negotiation process happen also along the lines of say, when we know that the SAG is going to meet is, of course, something we aim for, but it's good from far from good in terms of being able to hit that mark. And, as this conversation is unfolding, I wonder, and this might be a terrible idea, but just sort of thinking out loud, if sort of to bring the SAG and maybe the ESC further into the conversation sooner might be that either a SAG chair or an ESC member gets copied on some of that earlier conversation, sort of as a early heads up that potential project review might be, coming your way at the next SAG meeting or the SAG meeting after that, or something along those lines. And then finally, one more thing while I have the mic, and then I'll shut up. One conference that I know quite a few members of the regulated community, project developers and consultants attend is the Renewable Energy Vermont conference, which happens in sort of mid-October every year. And I know Billy Coster has done some great presentations at that meeting with overall Section 248 natural resources and environmental criteria presentations, and maybe that's something to look into for the sort of community outreach level work that Fish and Wildlife Department does.
That might be a good one for the Meadowlark, as it was pointed out that things have changed and we have a new plan in the works.
New guidance.
Yeah. Since it's a renewable energy thing, energy solar.
Yeah, one of the things we're trying to get the new guidance finished, and the NRB is interested in hearing meeting with us and having us join their fall meeting. So we just have to button it up. It's one of those things.
Yeah.
With the hopes of Noel being able to present to them in the fall, which it's fall now, isn't it?
Technically not quite.
Approaching.
Yeah.
The impending federal listing of the wood turtle will add another layer of complications to all that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Carla, I think that's really helpful. Thanks for that. I think in particular, I do like the suggestion of, I'm happy to be copied on emails, but I think it's, really it's the SAG chairs are probably the ones who are going to have the expertise that is going to really come into play in terms of thinking about what might be some of the conditions on an incidental take permit. So I don't know, we might think about that moving forward.
Yeah, earlier the better, I
Yeah.
think, and to kind of head off that if we have something to think about, so it doesn't just kind of pop up out of the blue and
Right. Yeah.
Try to get a Zoom call with as many members as you can together and do all that kind of stuff. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just go back. Noel has his hand up. Go ahead.
You keep interrupting me, John. I just wanted to point out that that sounds like a great idea. The real, I don't know if it's a concern or an issue, but the hang up here is that sometimes it's difficult to find the right time to do that because projects will change. So I could send you an email that says it's going to be this, this, and this, and then, you know, some report survey comes back and it has to change some other way, and that means I have to update you again because it's changed slightly. It doesn't happen all the time, but, you know, these projects can be fairly dynamic in the early stages. So the thought was, let's wait until it's actually nailed down and we know what they can and can't do based on, you know, our interactions with our experts. I'm reaching out to our biologists and species experts for comments on these things before I tell any of the developers anything. So that's just something to keep in mind, that it isn't always cut and dry.
Yeah, yeah.
You took the words out of my mouth, Noel.
Yeah. Yeah, that is true. You know, oh, gee, gotta send out another email because there's, yeah. It's better to have it come to us as complete as possible.
Yeah, well, we saw that with the Danville solar, which, you know.
Right.
Just, yeah, that was all over the place.
Yeah.
And to John Cart's earlier point, I mean, the objective early, dealing with some of these issues early in the process with the consultants is to avoid them needing a takings permit altogether.
Right.
Right.
And sometimes it takes a while in order to achieve that outcome.
I'll just, I don't know if I should say this or not, but I'll just put it out there. When when you're talking about capacity and, you know, some of the challenges in putting documentation together or best practices, you might think about AI and whether or not,
Oh,
I
boy.
mean, there's just enough information out there that you might be able to pull a draft of a document together that doesn't make you start from scratch. And then you can go to the chat bot where the developer can just come to you and just ask questions about statute, about, you know, how to fill out the form. You know, that. So anyway, not to take your job away, Noel.
If it gets me in the field more, I'm all for it.
I'm just saying, you know, I mean, it's kind of amazing, you know, what some of these tools can do. And, you know, not to say that you can snap your fingers and put a finished document together, but there is a lot of opportunities to get, you know, something down on paper that gives you a starting point.
Mhm.
So don't shy away from it.
I'll just give a quick comment that the state has, I think we are the first state in the union that has an AI division. There's like one guy, maybe two now. And it was all sort of, we're not really sure whether you can use it or not in state government. We're working on it. So there's another hang up there, but yeah.
Yeah.
Merlin has put us bird trip leaders out of business, basically. I find myself just telling stories because, you know, you take half a second and everybody's like, well, Merlin said. Merlin said. So, you know, technology, but, you know, so.
Yeah, seek as well, right?
Yeah. I'll just go walk.
Yeah.
By yourself then. And, you know, I can tell you stories about this.
Yeah. Gotta take them in the field when
So
they're.
what you're saying is the next version of Merlin has to have a story section.
That's right. Click here to hear a researcher who's worked on this particular bird.
Yeah.
It probably, I
Yeah.
wouldn't be surprised if there's not gonna be some kind of.
The Mark LaBar bot.
Yeah. I never
That
go
would
anywhere
scare
without my
many
Mark
people.
LaBar.
You turn this thing off.
You become like a hologram, like a Star Wars.
Live on.
We laugh now.
I know, that will actually happen.
I don't like the sound of any of it. Pencil, paper,
You're
road.
doing the Gifford Pinchot, like house in Pennsylvania, Newark, whatever, is doing something like that where it's like it's using AI to like recreate his voice, and so you can ask him questions. Gifford Pinchot, and it somehow,
No.
I don't know.
I just can't, yeah.
You'll have holograms of birds and all the other endangered
Yeah,
species.
yeah, it'll pop
We'll
right
be able
up.
to go
Yeah,
chat
yeah.
with Aldo Leopold and his cat.
Exactly.
You still need people hopefully to put little rings on their feet though.
Stephanie, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just wondering if, and probably not the Endangered Species Committee directly, but maybe others in Fish and Wildlife have reviewed Act 181, which changes a little bit of Act 250 and regional planning requirements in a way of location-based development, and whether or not Fish and Wildlife can engage with regional planning commissions to kind of so, like, I mean, I know takings permits, like the context of where you're building, you might not know what's going on in that area. So I understand that, but whether or not there's an opportunity to direct certain kinds of development somewhere where those species are not located, I don't know. I mean, devil in the details. I just am mentioning this new law and planning, planning to put things in places which could facilitate developers and or avoidance practices with respect to a species that we're trying to protect, or even their habitat, even if they're not currently located in that spot. So I just wanted to mention that. Thanks.
An interesting
know about
point,
that one?
Stephanie. I'm not familiar with that.
I'm not either.
But we do have a conservation planner in the Wildlife Division, Jens Hilka, who works regularly with all of the regional planning commissions. And so he's dealing with everything from sort of Vermont conservation design, landscape scale, and natural community scale conservation planning efforts to help guide regional planning commissions and local planning commissions to develop plans to direct development such that it's mindful of those resources. But he's also dealing with things at the fine scale. So that information does get brought into the conversations with the RPCs. I'm curious about Act 181. I'll look into that, Stephanie. Actually, it reminds me, since this past legislative session, legislature promulgated a law that amends Act 250, which will now include a criteria to consider the effects of development on forest fragmentation and connectivity. It's also going to create some new jurisdictional triggers that will be natural resource based. And our department will have a role in developing the rules that will govern those activities in the permit process, in addition to being the obvious arm of state government that's going to have to do the assessments on projects seeking an Act 250 permit that might have fragmentation effects.
So that means another job for somebody who's gonna fund that.
Great question.
That is the great question of the day.
That was brought up in our testimony with Commissioner and Secretary Moore this last legislative session. That is, yes, this added criteria makes sense, but you also need to give us the capacity to do the work, and that was not provided.
Late oversight, huh?
I think this is one of the most frustrating parts of the legislature, is they think that there's unlimited resources. That when you do this,
Yeah, but how can we think that really? Come on.
because they don't live in the real world.
I think they look across the agency and look at the number of employees and somehow think, well, there's all these people there. They'll figure out a way to do it. They'll just shuffle things around. Like, I think they don't look at, well, this actually affects this program, which has 3 people in it. They just look across the big picture and think that state government's this big thing that can somehow absorb the extra work. I'm just guessing
Even though they're
that,
part of state government.
Yes.
yeah, they're just not the implementation part.
The
Right.
whole state house is been there. It's a different world.
Yeah.
They're taught, we laugh about legislative time. start at 10 o'clock. You get there at 10 o'clock. Oh, we're not gonna have you until 11:30. Well, you think I got time to just sit around here waiting for you? I mean, they think that. And so, they're not the most efficient group of people in the world, but then they come up with these ideas. And they may be great ideas, but they refuse to understand that there's a draw on resources. And there's a finite amount of stuff we're gonna get done.
Should be part of their initial packet they receive and they come up with.
This is what it's like to have Noel and Roz as your neighbor. That lower box. It looks like you folks are looking over a fence into somebody else's backyard.
What is that? And where did it come from?
That's really funny.
Yeah.
I think Roz is on a hot.
Somebody has hijacked your meeting.
What the, I've never seen that
Me
before.
neither.
What the heck?
That's really funny.
Where are you guys?
Yeah. Are you in a hot tub?
No, when it showed up, it was way out and it zoomed way in. It's like a rock bonsai sculpture garden or something. I don't know.
I just can't wait to put this recording on the internet for all to see.
Oh,
Oh, no. Oh, boy.
No, it's just the cables.
That looks like the work of somebody like Brian Pfeiffer. who's unverified.
I just got here and
You do
I
that,
did
Brian?
put it into, I apologize for being late, by the way. I put it into like together mode.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I can't see the
Brian,
room.
if you turn your camera on, I think you can join Roz and.
Yeah, I'd rather not do that.
There might be some good butterflies in
Great, I'm in my
Odd though that Noel has a shirt on, that's a little weird.
okay.
All right,
Okay, that's
Why
now.
did you use it?
even weirder.
Oh, that's creepy. You look like the Roman Senate, members of the Senate.
Wow.
Okay.
I haven't changed any settings.
I
Yeah,
guess
but-
that was me.
No,
I
he's
don't know
got it
why.
We
Right,
did,
but-
yeah,
Yeah.
the together mode, we can do
Yeah.
different.
Okay.
Different
It looks
views.
like the Senate
Nice.
from the Star Wars
Yeah.
movies.
Perfect.
I have to uncheck that
Yeah.
guests can have any control over the
Right.
settings.
Anyone-
Clearly it can't be
anyone else
trusted.
wanna join in the garden, feel free to turn your camera on. So,
Wow.
I appreciate, Noel, I appreciate your time and the comments from everybody else. I think it's been helpful for me. It kind of segues into the next agenda item, which is just setting our meeting dates for the upcoming year. In particular, Roz has had some conversations with Jen Mojo about the next Lamproside permit we're gonna get. And because of, in particular now, the 30-day public comment period, it just takes longer for that permit to go through the entire process. And if we could move the meeting in January to later in the month, there's a decent chance, I guess, that we might actually be able to have it before our January meeting to have a conversation about it as a group, as opposed to coming up in the April meeting, which puts pressure on everybody to get something discussed and through the SAG and through the ESC prior to getting to the secretary and the 30-day comment period. So if folks can pull out their calendars, I'd like to look at January because I think we're on the books for early January right now.
And I have one caveat
Oh, okay.
before we do that, which is Jen has asked Fish and Wildlife, her contact with Fish and Wildlife Service, which might be Brad,
Brad.
whether or not that will enable them to get their permit done in early January so that there's time for ESC to take their preview. But she has not heard back. I checked with her as recently as this morning and she's waiting to hear back. So you can decide to go ahead and move it anyway. I just can't, we haven't heard back from them to guarantee that this will make it all work. I'm hopeful it
Do
will.
we actually have a meeting on the books for January?
January 8th.
Okay. Oh, right, yeah,
I think
yeah,
that might be a bigger
Yeah.
room.
yeah,
Yeah, bigger room.
yeah.
This is as big as it gets. It's not long.
So we could go ahead and move it if it's not a trouble. I just, it's not a guarantee, so.
Yeah, okay. I think from my perspective, what the heck, we might as well, I mean, at this point, let's go ahead and move it if folks are amenable. Go ahead, Brian.
Well, I was just, I'm just checking in, so I'm a little unclear of the timeline for all this, but I'm kind of wondering if there might be a way for at least the invertebrate SAG, or actually other SAGs, the herb SAG as well, to sort of plug in as the, during the development of that permit application, so that rather than having us look at something once the application is already created and on paper, whether we might offer some suggestions along the way, and whether we might want to meet to consider that first.
Yeah, which was, I mean, I think kind of the idea Carla was talking about with respect to earlier input. I mean, the Lamberside permits seem to go through a little bit of a different channel than, I mean, Noel and John, you don't have anything to do with the Lamberside permits, do you?
Correct.
Yeah, yeah. So, I don't know, that might be, I don't know, I'd be happy to reach out to Brad and Jennifer to see if that would be a possibility. I like the idea, so, yeah.
Okay. I mean, maybe we could form a little working subcommittee or something, possibly,
Mm-hmm, yeah, yeah. Well, I know, in the spring semester, I know I do teach every day of the week, so
It's rough.
I think probably Tuesdays are gonna be the best days of the week for me. I don't know how that works with other folks.
You're thinking the end of January?
Yeah, I mean, the 21st or the 28th, either one.
This will be the meeting that will be reporting SAG.
This would be SAG annual reports.
Right.
Yeah. Got that down after several years in this position. 21st or 28th, any preferences out there?
Either one.
Either one works for me.
Okay. Let's go with the 28th then. And shall we roll on into April? Anyone have any conflicts with April Tuesdays? I think for me, the 22nd looks clear.
Northeast Fish and Wildlife Conference, that would be the only.
Oh, yeah.
potential conflict
Yeah.
for some of us.
We might go back a week earlier then, maybe, because it seems like it's usually pretty, for us, it's pretty close to the end of the semester. How about the 15th, tax day?
That works for me. I will point out the 22nd is Earth Day.
Yeah, we should be celebrating, not in a meeting. Okay, let's go with the 15th then for the April meeting.
It's tax day.
Yeah. Indeed. You can multitask though, right?
Yeah, I finish my tax return, yeah.
Oh, why are you online today?
I
Okay.
got a bot doing that anyway.
All right, you wanna go for the full year, go out to
Yeah.
September? I will just say, I don't really know what my schedule is gonna be like next fall, so, I'm really flexible at this point. Department have anything going on in September that we should avoid?
September is always a busy month, but there's lots of conferences, folks traveling, but I don't, at this point, I'm wide open.
Yeah,
It's fine.
Tuesday would be fine.
okay.
The last
Um,
two, the last
go
two
ahead.
Tuesdays, I won't be here, but could meet online. The 16th would be better for me. But I could meet any day.
Okay.
I would prefer not that week just because we have the old growth conference that week.
9? Okay, go the 9. All right, awesome. Thanks so much.
I'd just like to report we have the Catamount room for the January meeting.
Hooray.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks. Want to take a quick break? We're not too far behind schedule. Take 10, stretch, and come back at 10:43. All right, thanks.
What do we do about Caspian terns?
Serving and recovering endangered and threatened species in the state. And then I think number 3, what really can be put into statute. So, we've had these conversations, it happens every meeting, but, we've already had them today about capacity, staff capacity, and that's not something that can really go into endangered species legislation. It's a totally different process. So I guess I just wanted to open up the conversation to the ESC as well as to the chairs, SAG chairs, about what could we do to strengthen the act? Where do you see are some opportunities for things that, might be efficiencies or things that maybe are missing in terms of our, current laws? So go for it.
I'm wondering, as far as the recovery plans are concerned, if taking that suite of species approach may potentially take steps towards that. Just kind of instead of writing a plan for every single species, maybe especially with the wildlife action plan, if we're thinking of that in terms of the communities, whether we can think of suites of species as approaching and habitat management in that context as approaching a means of having quote unquote plans for every ENT species that are out there, because that's just not doable. And capacity wise and even plan wise, coming up with how you're going to solve those issues.
So are you talking about, we actually discussed that in this work group, that same thought, and came around to the idea that there's nothing in statute or rules preventing us from doing that already, as evidenced by the grassland bird.
Right.
So I don't know I think we can go ahead and be doing that without changes to without having to go through any legislative process, unless you're thinking of whether there's some way to provide, to incentivize that somehow through rule changes or statute changes, but
No, I don't think so. I think it's more of a way to meet the folks that want a plan for every species kind of halfway. To say that, and the format that we did for the grassland bird may not work. It may be a completely different format. That's me just taking a shot at it way back when. But just something that aligns the wildlife action plan with the way that we're thinking of management, and also, I don't want to say placates, but, answer some of the questions for the people that are asking about recovery plans for every single species. I'm just throwing that out.
yeah, I mean, I think there's been a lot of interest in that, and we kind of keep coming around to that wish, especially for invertebrates, and to me that seems like a programmatic, trying to figure out how to programmatically carry that out and pull that off. But there could be ways to incentivize it somehow that we're not thinking of.
It's funny because I'm myopic in my thinking. I'm thinking birds, but yeah, invertebrates. One little stretch of river can have, and the shoreline. Be host to any number of ENT species, I would imagine.
It would work for fish very well, because the fish, all the listed fish are basically below the fall line, below 150 feet elevation in the Champlain drainage.
Yeah.
And they're all pretty much, they have similar needs. And that would work fairly well. It would by putting together a recovery plan, or listing threats and actions for a group as opposed to each one. It would save a lot of repetition.
Yes, yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead, Brian.
I just only wanted to add to, I think it was Mark talking, I can't see the room, that I don't know, I think it really does come down to personnel, unfortunately. And, we were talking about AI, like AI is not going to go into a bog and swing a net in a rare dragonfly. And although give it time, maybe it will, and Kent may disagree. And Kent may chime in here also with this point, and that is just to add to what Mark said, VCD, like we've got Vermont Conservation Design as well, which is, phenomenal. And to the extent that the modeling might work as a nexus with the Wildlife Action Plan and some of our, our concerns on the committee. I don't know whether that's been considered. I'll just add that to the conversation. Whether, even if it takes personnel time for modeling or anything like that, so that there's more overlap with rare, threatened, or endangered species.
Brian, can you explain what you mean by the modeling? What you're talking about there?
Well, for invertebrates, for example, I think, maybe I'm wrong about this, but, there's so many botanists out there, and we know a lot about the botany of this state. Mammal diversity is not as high. Herps are, perhaps more manageable. Invertebrates, in some respects, it can come down to, like there's so many, and it's really driven so much by who's out there looking. And Kent, I think, might have some ideas about whether you could model for, with help of VCD on suites of, sensitive species or SGCNs.
So habitat modeling?
Yeah.
Where you basically don't have the element occurrences that would enable you to actually put that right into, BioFinder or CD.
Yeah, Kent's got, we talk about AI, there are these autonomous invertebrate recording units taking pictures of invertebrates, and sending them to the cloud, out in the field, unstaffed, sending to the cloud and getting IDs. Maybe Kent's off on a fire call or something. I don't know. Oh, there he is.
I don't know. I got a lot to say about it probably, but I'm not sure that's all in my brain right now coming out very well. So I don't have a lot to say other than with invertebrates. Unfortunately, if you just look at butterflies, for example, and you look at endangered butterfly species in North America, those that have recovered, the butterflies that we've recovered, in almost every instance, it's because we figured out all the natural history to the butterfly, and it turned out that was the key to making it survive. In each case, it was different. It was like, in one case, it might have been, they're reliant on early successional beaver ponds, and so we have to have that on the landscape. In another case, it was like, they're reliant on this certain host plant. And so in each case, if you look at these different butterflies that have been recovered or on the road to recovery across North America, it's because we knew the natural history of it, and it had nothing to do with necessarily with large scale habitat issues. So I think invertebrates are a little bit different than everything else in some cases. I guess that's where I'll leave it. So it takes a lot more with invertebrates maybe than it does with some other things.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. One of the things I guess that comes to my mind is, if when SAGs are working on the Wildlife Action Plan, maybe, in addition to maybe doing some proofing and checking about associations with natural communities, think about whether or not there's a natural community out there that you might be interested in, partnering with another SAG on. So, I'm thinking about what you just said, Rich, with fish. I mean, would that be a good partnership with the invertebrate SAG on mussels? Might those two go together? And so there might be some opportunities there to at least just kind of take a preliminary look at some of the natural communities where you've got overlap across SAGs. And and again, this might be something that has nothing to do with number of breeding pairs or population size, but maybe you're actually just talking about number of conserved acres or protected acres or something like that is really the goal there. It's not, again, sort of thinking about simplifying this, maybe it's acres and ecological function, something along those lines. I'm not sure what it would be, but just trying to think a little bit more in holistically about how we might pull some of this off.
Back to the topic of legislation. So all of these great ideas that you're kicking around, as Ross said earlier, don't require legislative change. That's just a matter of policy decision that we could decide to do business this way. But in terms of legislation, I think these sorts of ideas would be an important part of whatever the conversation is going to look like when we do go back to the House Energy and Environment Committee and talk with them about their interest in biodiversity conservation, the endangered species law, and importantly, the capacity that is required in order to uphold the responsibilities that are established by that law.
Yeah.
Because I think they need to hear very clearly that there are ways that don't require statutory change to improve our ability to effectively and efficiently recover some of these species, but it requires resources to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yep. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, thinking about, I guess, legislative related improvements. One of the things, and this is maybe plant specific, that one of the biggest holes in our protections, I think, is the sort of differential treatment of non-listed but rare plants between Act 250 and Section 248. And so I don't know if a T&E rule specifically can really get at this. But currently, folks may or may not be aware, unlisted rare plants are not well protected under Act 250. They receive a much higher level of protection under Section 248, and so that's obviously it's not a level playing field there between those two review processes, and it's a big gap in our protections for rare species or rare plants specifically. And then I guess taking it down to another level is just if smaller scale developments, things that don't trigger Section 248 or Act 250 review, if there was some way of incorporating better review for rare species there. I guess that's another hole I see in our legal protections.
And is in the case of plants, I probably should know this, is that an S ranking?
Yeah, you mean the 248 versus 250?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. The way we usually speak of these things is rare is S2, very rare is S1, uncommon is S3. That's the way we sort of default to in plant world here.
Yep.
Kylie has it.
Kylie.
Yeah, slightly along similar lines, but I just thought I'd take the opportunity to bring the subject back up that over the last year, the HerpSAG, working with Luke Groff, had put together some proposed changes to regulations, adding protections for non-game reptiles and amphibians, or rather closing some loopholes. Also, more tightly regulating the sales of pond sliders to prevent a potential invasive species. I think John Austin is still on the call here. The legislature last year didn't take that up, but we are hopeful that the legislature would take that up in the next session.
Yeah, that's been that's the intent. Am I getting to? Sorry, hang on.
Right now.
Okay, sorry, everyone. I think I sound just like one person now. Yeah, that's already going to be proposed again, Kylie, for next year, is to take that proposal and make it part of this whole package. And there's also interest in broadening the language to expand beyond herps for some of these extra protections, and we start getting into discussions about non-game, not just T&E species, and whether we're going to go there or not, or whether we just focus on T&E this year and go to non-game next year. We haven't sorted any of that out, but I think there's an opportunity to protect beyond herps as well. But that what we put forward last year is what you all crafted, will be put forward again this year, I believe.
Great, thanks. Good to hear it.
And thanks for the work crafting it.
So I have to ask, I keep hearing reference to Act or Section 248. What is that all about? It's more of a finer look at species.
It's the second, when we refer to Section 248, we're referring to the statutory authority for the Public Utility Commission. So that lays out how the Public Utility Commission operates, what their permit process is like, how they make decisions. And so it's similar in some respects to Act 250. In fact, it adopts most of the criteria from Act 250, but it also broadens them. So it looks at the the effects of a project on the natural environment, which gives us a broader opportunity to address things like fragmentation and connectivity, which up until this year, Act 250 never did take that into consideration.
And rare plants versus, and not just threatened or endangered plants. Whereas Act 250 doesn't cover rare plants.
We've dealt with rare plants, and I appreciate Matt Peters bringing this up because this has been a challenge for us for many, many years, trying to find ways of protecting the interests of rare plants in Act 250. And the way we've done it, it's either been on bended knee, just trying to, get people to do what seems to be the right thing in order to protect the interests of those rare species, or to do it through the rare and irreplaceable natural area designation. Or there's a criteria in Act 250 that protects what they define as rare and irreplaceable natural areas, which is typically rare and unique natural community assemblages, which often have those rare plants.
Okay, they're not necessarily tiering species, but
they're not.
They have a ranking that.
And they also differ in the burden of, so Act 250, well, you can speak to this better than me after years, but Act 250, there's the burden is on us, in our case, to prove impact, to prove there's an issue, and whereas in 248, they have to prove there is no impact. So there's a different burden of proof there. So 248 is more protective in that way, with having to prove that there's no impact to species or habitat.
Okay, when people talk about they have to go through an Act 250 hearing, so this section 248 is something that would be part of that hearing, or in the process, if you're if you have a project that's being reviewed under Act 250, is there a separate review that's just section 248?
The two typically don't.
They don't overlap.
So the Public Utility Commission regulates public utilities.
Okay.
So it's very specific to energy projects and telecommunications, transportation, or power corridors, that sort of thing. Act 250 does not regulate those activities.
Okay.
Act 250 sort of regulates everything else.
Most everything.
Okay, so they're two separate,
Very
depending on what the impact is going to be.
Or what the activity, or the proposed activity is. So like a wind energy project or a solar energy project, that would all be subject to the Public Utility Commission permit review process. It would not see Act 250.
Got it. A big difference.
Jed, go ahead.
Great, thanks. Sorry, I just have a quick question. I'm looking at the proposed bill here, and Alan, you stated that one of the provisions is that the threatened endangered species list would be evaluated every 3 years. I guess I should know this, but just for clarification, is there a requirement like that list currently is updated on some regular interval? I like the idea of a regular interval too, and I also wanted to ask, like, was there a rationale for 3 years? And I say that partly because I could see that being an appropriate time frame for a lot of smaller species, but for some of the big species, like, not a lot may change over 3 years unless there's some extreme threat, right? I'm thinking larger mammals, for example. So was there a rationale for the 3 years?
Yeah, as far as I know, it was essentially drawn out of a hat. I don't think there's any actual rationale for 3 years. And I think what you're saying is true. I mean, the challenge in many ways is, given the fact that so few species have recovery plans, we don't actually have goals, population goals on paper that we're actually evaluating species against. So it becomes kind of challenging to say, oh, should the rusty blackbird, for example, be no, we have a recovery plan for no, we don't. Yeah. Should the rusty blackbird be removed from the T&E list? when, we have a little bit of eBird data, but we don't have anything to compare it to. So I think that to me was one of the challenges, is to say, yes, we can re-review and maybe some species get elevated into another category for, maybe special projects with a SAG, or maybe a proposal for a SWIG grant. But it's hard to say much would change given the lack of recovery plans.
I mean, with the birds, go ahead, Jen.
Oh, and just to clarify too, we don't have a regular review of the TNE species list at present.
Correct, yeah, right, yes.
So it's just,
Yep.
it's sort of ad hoc when we feel like it's necessary, then, right? Do I have that right?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
In the past, it's sort of some build up, and when I don't know, when there seems to be sort of a handful of them at some point,
Yeah.
then it ends up, because it's a process, it again requires work and capacity. The attorneys especially don't want to have to do it too often because it adds to their workload. But so the idea is, unless there's like there's something really in emergency need of being listed, which is why I like the idea of having some kind of provision that deals with that. That it's better to wait until you have a few lined up, ready to go, and then you send it all through as a package. So it's
With the bird SAG years ago, we developed a tier 1 and tier 2 list, which we, annually, very informally, throw out there. Do we think any species need to be looked at more closely in order to think about, proposing them to the Endangered and Threatened Species Committee? Meadowlark was one that did rise to that occasion, and we were able to collect data, thanks to Kevin Tolan and others. And we were able to then push it up to the level of the NT species. So loosely, the bird SAG kind of reviews, thinks about it. I won't say officially reviews on an annual basis, but we're dealing with a far fewer number of species than, say, the inverts. For them to go through and review, that's almost a monumental task.
The tier 1 and tier 2, what Mark is referring to is a list of species we call species of special concern. There's a lot of overlap with species of greatest conservation need. It's not quite perfect, but these are, in essence, the bird equivalents of, S1 and S2 in the plant world. So Kylie and then Matt.
Yeah, just looking at this proposed legislation, the wording is a little vague. I think it just says the bill would require that basically a revision to the list every 3 years, but I don't think it goes into the details as to say, look at every single species and reevaluate whether or not they meet the criteria to be on the endangered species list. Would the secretary basically be leaning on the ESC and the SAGs to call their attention to specific species that might warrant a change in status?
Yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Then I don't. Yeah, I mean, 3 years that could make sense. It at least provides a mechanism for keeping, species statuses on the radar and have us all scrutinizing our lists and seeing what needs to be changed.
That sounds great to me.
Matt?
Oh,
Or
yeah.
I don't know if you have your hand up?
Well, I was just going to comment, I guess, with regard to the notion of sort of a mandated review or update. I mean, at least from the plant perspective, I mean, we're regularly updating our S ranking as it is. I mean, I think at least in recent years, it's been about every other year we're coming out with an updated official rare and uncommon plant list for the state that Fish and Wildlife puts out. That's not listing, TRE listings specifically, because of course that's a legislative process. And then I guess there's a larger issue in terms of this review. I mean, essentially from a plant perspective, we have a backlog of species that probably warrant listing in terms of whether or not they'd meet the criteria. We as a scientific advisory group are simply capacity limited in being able to actually put them forward. And then, how much appetite is there for legislatively for adding a whole slug of species all at once. So we sort of, as we can marshal the data and the effort to put together listing proposals, we do it a little bit at a time. And oftentimes that there's novel field work that's required that happens primarily on a volunteer basis and so forth. So I would definitely be hesitant to any kind of like mandated comprehensive overhaul every 3 years or whatever. But yeah, just our perspective.
I think that's really great perspective, Matt. I mean, it sounds to me like the SAGs are already self-imposing a pretty regular check on the status of the lists for their respective species. And sometimes it's one of these things, be careful what you ask for. If you have the statutory requirement to do a review on a regular basis, well, that's added work. We're all capacity limited. The capacity really needs to be in developing recovery plans and recovering species and figuring out the metrics for how we're going to evaluate success moving forward. Since there's nothing that prevents us from updating and checking the list every year if we want to, I'm just questioning what the value is of having a statutory requirement for a regular assessment of the list.
Yeah, to me, it strikes me as sort of a solution in search of a problem.
That's what I was going to say.
One possibility is I mean, there's a very different sort of burden for like looking through the list of endangered birds versus looking through the list of endangered plants. But that could be a part of a SAG meeting. I mean, we could probably put it in the operational guidelines in terms of, regular review of the list of T&E species for changes, I mean, in essence, if you're looking only at the list of T&E species, all you can do is uplist or delist. The other half is harder. What are the species out there that actually need to be listed? So I don't know. I mean, that's something we could consider, and maybe for the January meeting worth having this conversation as all the SAGs are giving their annual reports, and that might be something to kind of keep in mind as a annual or biannual goal of the SAGs. It's just a review of their own taxa lists. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, I heard that adding species to the lists, either or delisting, has to go through a legislative process. Is that just the rulemaking process?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was wondering, like rulemaking in and of itself is labor intensive, and whether or not there are, and we're talking about capacity, there would be an opportunity to make a change about how you list species and taking it out of the rulemaking process, because then, you'd have maybe a little more flexibility in adding or taking away things. But I mean, obviously still creating a public process. That's what we're considering relative to introduced, unwanted introduced species, plant pests. Is to not include our list as a part of our rule so that we can have some flexibility. And it creates an opportunity. It doesn't mean you have to, again, you don't have to go through that. If you don't want to add anything, you don't have to add anything, but you don't have to go through rulemaking process, which is again expensive in and of itself.
I think that's a really interesting, Stephanie. I don't know if you can say a little bit more about the process that you're going through to make that happen. I mean, one of the things that is always a little bit challenging about the listing process or even the delisting process. We've also created our own bureaucracy in terms of the forms that we need to fill out, the data that we need to have. So we actually go through quite a bunch of, gyrations and hoop jumping to put a proposal out there, and then to actually then oftentimes have it wait around for 3 or 4 years until we've got a bunch to put through rulemaking has been, I don't know, it's a little frustrating sometimes. So maybe if you can talk a little bit about how you're hoping to make that change, like.
Yeah. So we don't have a requirement in the law specifically that says we have to put our lists together in our rule. We just currently have the list of pests, plant pest species incorporated into our rule currently. So what we're doing is we're defining a different process that includes public involvement and kind of checks the boxes of the rulemaking process, but outside of rulemaking through a committee, not unlike this kind of a committee, where we would consider pest risk assessments. That is the bureaucracy that you just spoke of, and so that still happens. And then we would consider and we have what we call a watch list, which is where species come from that we want to consider for putting in a plant pest quarantine. And then so we do the pest risk assessment. It gets vetted by a committee. It goes through a public process. And this is all proposed currently in a draft of a revised rule. So we haven't actually gotten through the rulemaking process to change our process for adding species. So it sounds very confusing. I apologize. I'm happy to share a copy of our draft that kind of outlines what we're trying to do. But anyway, so it'd be a public process at a committee that's established by the rule itself. And just by virtue of going through that public process, a recommendation is made to the secretary, and then the secretary says, this is an unwanted introduced plant pest species, and then it just gets added. It doesn't go through rulemaking. It wouldn't go through the formal rulemaking process to add that species. I hope that makes sense, because it's kind of weird because we're actually in rulemaking to change the process.
To change it.
That would
Yeah.
prevent us from having to go through rulemaking.
Did you get what sort of did you get pushback on this idea, and what was the nature of it, if you did?
So we actually haven't submitted our APA paperwork yet, but we have talked to a number of partners, and we don't see, like, the biggest, where we see the pushback is potentially the nursery industry, where they are actually currently retailing a species that we want to list. And that there would be economic harm, but that's actually one of the criteria that we consider in the pest risk assessment paperwork. And again, it goes through a public process, and we take things into consideration, is our goal. But I think that would be the greatest pushback. As far as from a legislative standpoint, we don't know. We don't know yet. We haven't actually engaged any legislators, and whether or not they think that the public process for listing species is really important, going through the APA process. But what it does is it prevents us from protecting what we love if we have to go through that whole process, much like what you mentioned, Alan. You wait for 4 years to go through the rulemaking process to list something that you want to protect. And therefore it lags, and you don't have that ability to be, I don't know that it's nimble. It's still probably a bit of a process, but more nimble, a little more flexibility is what we're trying to develop.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. That's I like it.
Happy to share. I'll share. I'll send out our
Yeah,
draft.
that'd be great. That'd be great.
Yep.
Well, we're sort of probably behind schedule, but luckily my computer's fallen asleep, so I'm not gonna actually look at where we are. I do want to mention one other thing that I think Roz kind of hinted at, and it's a part of the conversation that is it goes on in the federal endangered species world, I guess I would say. And something I guess I've kind of wondered about whether or not there's opportunities here. And so, Roz was asking about incentives. And, I think one of the challenges in terms of having critical habitat listed for every species is the fact that, most species are found on private land. And so really challenging to think about how you might list critical habitat that's going to involve the public essentially, and seeing their property on a map that's going to have restrictions on what they can and can't do with their property. So thinking about, something like the federal government has with, for example, the Safe Harbors program, where there's opportunities to do beneficial things for endangered species, but in essence to hold them harmless in the face of uncertainty, I think is, one of the ways that program works. Whether or not there might be something that we might want to think about here that might incentivize private landowners to actually list their own property as critical habitat if they were given, some some certainty about potential changes over time, or maybe there's tax basis breaks, or maybe they can go into whatever current use or something along those lines. So just wondering if you think that is something that would be worth pursuing in Vermont, in terms of ways that we might be able to actually enlist more private landowners to get involved in endangered species conservation.
So there wouldn't be necessarily litigation against the landowner if they showed intent to, work with whatever it was, a state or a federal agency or something like that. In
Right,
good
yeah,
faith.
yes, exactly,
Right, so it's a
right,
little
yeah,
nebulous maybe, but I don't know how you make that into a firm rule, but I guess
Yeah.
what you're talking about has already been done at the federal level, right? So they
right,
must
yeah,
have some kind of a blueprint then.
yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of different mechanisms to get at that,
Mhm.
different programs they have. Some have worked better than others,
Uh-huh.
but at the state level, you could probably have a little more control too.
Right, it's probably not a perfect one, but
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think federally, all of those are incorporated into what they call habitat conservation plans, which are a component of the incidental takings permit at the federal level. What are you e-birding?
Yeah.
What do you got? I mean, you're looking right out that window.
yeah, no, I just saw a turkey bowl.
Anyway, we should.
I wonder
probably
if,
keep-
like,
Oh, go
rather
ahead,
than
Carla.
I was just thinking, I wonder, I like that idea, and I'm trying to think of maybe uh, leverage points or organizations or frameworks that are already in place to sort of hit the ground running, maybe within the outreach or approach on something like that. And Vermont has such a strong contingency of conserved land. Like, I wonder if there's some sort of programmatic level participation that, say, Vermont Land Trust eased properties, or properties that are enrolled in various USDA and NRCS conservation programs. If there's sort of a broad brush way to engage the the folks or the programs that individual landowners are participating in already.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's an idea. It's, something I'm not that familiar with, but is the, what is it, the ESTA designation
Mhm.
in, current use. It seems like that's one that, there have been conversations about, but I'm wondering if there might be some other opportunities.
I was gonna mention that the way when the rules were changed for the EVA program, Ally may know about this, but and the ESTA category was created. It allows for the consideration of a lot of different things, including rare, threatened, endangered species. So right now you have the ability to work with private landowners through UVA to identify areas of critical habitat and have them reflected in their plan. And of course, they get the benefit of, they get the tax benefits of being enrolled.
Yeah,
There's no,
in rare and uncommon natural communities as well. So
Yeah.
it can be the natural community scale, old forests.
Yeah.
It's categorized in that. And then with the new reserve forest land category, if landowners have more than 30%, well, it depends on the size of your parcel, more than 30% of area that is considered unique. It could be an ESTA, it could be some other qualities like riparian habitat, vernal pools. You can have the entire parcel be under this reserve forest land category, which allows for passive management under current use.
What is ESTA?
Ecologically sensitive treatment area. So that gets designated by essentially the forester and then approved by the county forester. And so they just have to document, yes, there's T&E species or, uncommon rare natural communities, riparian habitat like lakes and, ponds often get included in that area. So sort of allows for a spatial, area that is included in that ESTA. And they can be of any size, really.
and all of those areas that are designated also get reviewed by our ecologist. Used to be Eric Sorensen, now it's Bob Zingman.
And those ESTAs are fairly new. They're less than 3 years old now. And Bob Zana will often say that he wishes enrollment was higher than it is. And so it comes back again to broadcasting it more, finding more landowners who are interested, overlaying it with where endangered species may occur, like all that kind of work that could increase participation, I think.
Maybe get rid of the acronym, and actually spell it out.
Yeah.
I think it's been longer than 3 years.
Has it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's been.
For the endangered species? 'Cause we were- I'm talking about for
ESTA.
endangered species. Sorry, yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But the ecological sensitive treatment area.
That's
the
been,
acronym.
Right.
yeah, that's been around longer.
Right.
Yeah, so the endangered species were added about less than 3 years ago, so.
Good idea.
Matt, I'll give you the last word.
Oh, yeah, I was just gonna say, this would be a really great strategy to have incorporated into the wildlife action plan, if it isn't already, is just to specifically basically comb through all the current use lands, identify those that have existing mapped rare species or state significant natural communities, and do some outreach to those landowners if they're not already enrolled as ESTAs or reserve forest lands, and try to heighten the level of protection that those areas are getting as a habitat level approach to conserving rare species.
Yeah, right now it's very hard to sort of comb through current use plans with that level. I would love that, but they're not all digitized. People go through new plans every 10 years unless they need
Right.
an amendment. So it just isn't, we aren't there yet, because I'd even love to understand, different patterns of what people are doing for management keyword. We just can't do that yet. So we just don't have that ability to and I would also say, we focus a lot on current use of our privately owned forest land. Only half of our forest land is enrolled in current use because of size restrictions. You need 25 acres. So there's a lot of people that have 15 acres, 20 acres that aren't enrolled. And so unless they engage with a county forester, because they're just interested in their forest land, they wouldn't know if they have some of these conditions or species. And so there's a huge group, a huge, acreage of land that we just don't have a great way to engage with, because there isn't this sort of tax benefit that they could incentivize some of that work.
In that grand and glorious future, when we get Covering America's Wildlife Act passed, I had this idea about offering incentives and training to consulting foresters to update current use plans and do the mapping for ESTAs. And their work would be the match to cover the federal funds we'd get through RAWA, and would help us get better and newly digitized information. But we'll see what happens.
Who would pay the consultants? The landowner?
We could create a fund,
Okay.
once we have the money, maybe the next federal administration, and that bill gets passed, we would have the federal funds, and we would need the state match to do that, and that could come from the work of foresters and county foresters. But that's the future.
How many acres are currently enrolled in UVA, 2 something million?
Matt, I think we're getting sound
Yeah.
from your background.
Oh,
There you go.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think it's like, I don't know what the number is, I could pull it up, but I think it's like
It's a lot.
something like 2 million. Yeah, something like that.
It's a huge opportunity.
Yeah.
The program is wildly successful.
Yes.
But, we sound like a broken record here when we talk about capacity challenges. But here's another great illustration of a successful, arguably the most successful conservation program that the state has ever implemented for private landowners. And the county foresters can barely keep pace with the requirements that it takes to have all of these thousands of private landowners enrolled in that program. It is a constant challenge.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about this, the ESTA mapping and component, because I'm involved with a project that we are getting funded through IRA, so it'll come through FPR through the private lands team, so Keith Thompson, and it's for underserved landowners, which is really an acreage threshold, which is 1,000 acres. So in our state, that pretty much covers everyone. We don't really have many landowners that exceed that size. And the way the proposal is built was for like carbon markets, but also forest resilience. And that includes this concept of like ensuring biodiversity or enhancing biodiversity habitat. They're a little vague on what resilience means, but somebody threw it in there, which is great. So it allows for this improvement of degradation from past land use, enhancements, things like that, preservation, ideas of increasing maybe buffers around sensitive areas and things like that. So that will be coming through soon, and it does actually involve us hiring. I'll be able to take on a new staff person at UVM, and then the private lands team is going to hire a couple folks. It's great, and it's a lot on outreach and communication with landowners. And so having more information about how to identify, training the consulting foresters, getting information on landowners, how to identify these habitats, what are the concerns. I think there's a huge piece that's missing there as far as information about, I think sort of Audubon's done a great job with bird habitat, but there's a lot of other species that aren't really on people's radars. Bats are coming up, but thinking about sort of other species and other and so the natural community scale of management, I think that would be, there's a huge area of information that is needed for folks, both landowners and consultants on that. And so hopefully they'll come through soon, get some capacity.
So can I just say, one of the things I always say to John is we need an Ali Kasiba for the wildlife department, who's locked in on this stuff and constantly thinking about all those applications. So just there it is, right?
No need to convince me.
Yeah, I know.
You want to move on, Al, but I just want to see this group related to this topic. So there's also the effort moving forward around Act 59 to develop the state's land conservation plan to achieve 30 by 30, 50 by 50 goals. This is hand in glove with that effort. Yeah. So that should be part of that conversation. This should inform that conversation. Because right now, most of it is rightly at the landscape scale, but we want to make sure that some of these fine filter interests aren't sort of lost.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll plant maybe one other seed in terms of thinking about like a SWIG grant, like supporting a graduate student to comb through
Mhm.
current use
Yes.
plans,
Yeah.
overlay with element occurrences, natural communities, and actually like ask the question, what are we missing in terms of that could actually be incorporated? And maybe we, just limit it to a moderate geographic area. Maybe it's not statewide and we do a couple counties or something.
Mhm.
I don't know, but that might be really interesting.
Aren't the current use parcels all digitized now? Because that would be a really simple GIS overlay
Yeah,
with
they
the various
are.
species.
They don't always have, if a landowner, it comes from the grand list, so sometimes when there's been landowner changes, it's a little slow to catch up, but yeah, that's all in the A&R Atlas, so we do have that. It's whether their plans are not digitized yet. The new ones are, that is what's happening. So there's gonna be a whole database for any new plans, and so you could limit it to only new plans that are already digitized, and so but it's just not, it's not comprehensive of all current use plans.
Right, I was just thinking.
And they're not always they're not in a standardized format either. That's something that they're working on, is making standard format for plans. So every consultant sort of does their own proprietary plan. And so, yeah, I think you need somebody like physically to like go through that. You can't really do a lot of, sort of, I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to do it programmatically.
All right, well, thanks, everyone. I was just gonna say, I mean, keep thinking about this. I think it's it's important and it's gonna be ongoing, but it's, when you have a ally in the legislature, I mean, I think it's really important to kind of keep our eye on the big picture, because I know many of our meetings are kind of spent with minutia, and it's really nice to be able to have the conversations about what we might want to look at in terms of really improving, we're taking advantage of opportunities to improve protection of any species. So given that we're behind schedule, how many folks here do have to split after lunch?
I do.
Okay.
I do.
Well, maybe then I'll just really quickly, and we can come back to this, but I will say that we've, once again, we're just kind of behind schedule in terms of the Sally Laughlin Award. And I've got that note in the agenda, the Dead Creek Day, when we've been typically giving out the award, is the 5th of October. So we really do need to make a decision, I think, today on it, if, either who might get this award or get a slate of nominees. Jim Andrews has sent around a nomination for Chris Rimmer, or a draft nomination for Chris Rimmer. Chris's name came up last year, but I think we thought that time was really right to honor Bill Kilpatrick. So Chris's name is out there, and I think what I'll do is, for folks who have to leave, I don't know if you've got some other names. I guess this is it's funny because it's a matter of, I mean, this is public record at this point. But you sort of like to keep these, a little bit secret, but whatever. Who's really going to listen to our recording or read our transcript?
Sure, Chris would. He's always right on top of stuff.
And that's why he's nominated.
Yeah, right, exactly. But tell you what, for Brian and Jed, I don't know, Matt, did you raise your hand if you're going to be around? If you have other names, I mean, put them in the chat or shoot me an email. It would really be nice to have a few nominees each year and not have to kind of be scrambling to think about someone to give this award to. I think it's I think last year with the press around Bill's awarding was really great. I think we can replicate that this year with whoever gets the award. So just maybe a quick little brainstorm before we move on here. Brian, were you gonna?
Well, I just want to second Chris. He was my number one choice. I'm not sure I had anyone else.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, I mean, Iskray Immer Ray. In case he's listening.
I'll never figure that out.
Yeah, it's funny. If you spell his name backwards, it's almost the same. So that doesn't work very well. Yeah. Reimer and
Remmer.
Yeah.
I don't have any other names to offer, but I certainly would second that. I think it's his time, and his work with Peregrine Falcons going way back. Right, Mark, and
Used
turns,
to turn back every time we went out in that little whaler.
Yeah.
Oh. Hitting those waves.
Yeah.
And forever, Leslie's gonna kill me. I'm late.
The number of times
Let's
she's
go over
murdered
to the
him
shore and
over the
see if we
years.
See any shorebirds really quick.
He said that at the office too.
Yeah.
You're like, I gotta work on this thing. Leslie's gonna kill me. I'm supposed to be home.
Yeah. No, I would, having, been mentored by Chris, I could say, as far as banding and doing turns, I would advocate for that too. The only question that I would raise, I don't know if it's that big of a deal, is whether gender's a consideration, whether we alternate, with gender and keep that in mind as well. But Chris being recently retired and his commitment and how much he's put into all of the things here in the state seems a logical choice.
Yeah, I took a quick look at the draft that Jim had sent around, and I guess, one of the things that he spent a fair amount of time talking about his bird work, but I think the work that BCE is doing around invertebrates is just amazing. I mean, you talk to people in other states and they're just envious about the various atlases that, Kent, you've been really spearheading these, but thinking about how do you fund an organization to actually do the work to conserve and inventory the species that a lot of people really don't care about. And I think that's really, it's unique in many ways.
Yeah, we have to save some of that for when Kent gets the award.
And not the award.
Yeah, he already got it.
Yeah.
Are you serious? I didn't.
No, he has,
I don't think I knew that.
Yeah.
Wait, Ellen, wait. People don't care about invertebrates? Like what?
I didn't realize Ken got these.
I didn't either. When did that? How'd that slip by?
Kent was second, wasn't he, after Sally?
Maybe.
I think we awarded it for the Kent's just not talking. It was kind of for the radio, the show that
Oh, okay. Yep.
yeah.
Sarah Kendra, yeah.
With Sarah.
Yeah, Kent, you should have that in the background or just your background screen for these things. Or wear it on your chest.
Yeah.
Well, with all the people out there, it's a little embarrassing. So I remain quiet. Like all the people have done all the great work. So
Yeah, we should give it to Chris because he was probably cursing that you got it before him.
Well, to add to what Alan was saying, I started editing that document, but it was like 9:30 at night last night, and so I didn't get very far. But yeah, I think more could be said about just how he enabled people like Kent to dramatically expand what we were looking at across the state, and And,
Yeah.
you know, so he was,
Myself, you, I mean.
he launched all these biologists. Yeah.
He was with Vince. I mean, many of the people that, again, he mentored are now actively participating in conservation.
Yeah, that's the other whole piece that's not in there yet, is just all that mentoring and all his offspring.
What bird is this, Ken? I mean, what bird is this, Chris? I don't know. Look it up. Standing at the banding table when I was first learning.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Look it up.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian. I don't know, Jed, you had your hand up there as
Just
well.
oh, sorry. Someone else ahead of me?
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Brian.
Just briefly, you know, I haven't seen the list and I can't quite recall who's gotten the award, but there is, if it is heavy on, you know, Y chromosome, you know, let's look at that in our biases for future picks in future years.
Yeah. Thanks for that.
It can be tough when the field has historically was anyway male dominated, and you're tending to recognize people who are advanced in their career. So population. That's, I could get an award for that. Doing really good at that.
But that's what it's all about, right? We want to get old.
Yeah, it's better than the alternative.
Yeah. Jed, go ahead.
Alan, yeah, is there a specific call for this too? Sorry, I'm fairly new to the group. Is there like a description of this award? I couldn't quite find that. And
Yeah,
a list of awardees, just to think about who has been awarded over the last X number of years.
Yeah. We have not done a very good job on a call, to be perfectly honest. So I think that's something we've often reached out to, you know, conservation partners, NGOs, for names. So I think we need to, I think we need to do a little bit better job of that.
Yeah, and a list of awardees.
Didn't we have an education committee that had kind of taken, or the ESC had an education committee that kind of took that on?
We did, and kind of what ended up happening was those people stepped off the ESC, and I have not reformed that subcommittee.
That's what I was
So,
wondering.
yeah,
I think a
yeah.
couple of them.
Yeah.
Alan, is there an up-to-date list of award recipients?
I was just looking online, and I'm not necessarily sure there is. Yeah. So I'm trying to think if I won't waste time here, but I can certainly recreate it. But yeah, Jen and I had a hallway conversation yesterday, you know, thinking about Heather Furman as a possibility. You know, we have had some members, former members of the ESC, you know, Dorothy Allard, champion for bryophytes, chair of the Endangered Species Committee for a while. Liz Thompson, also another possibility. So
Kim Royer.
Kim Royer, yeah. So retired Fish and Wildlife staff are eligible once they have retired. I guess we've used that as an informal rule. So yeah. No, I think I think staff are not eligible. So that's actually why. So yeah.
Trying to think of other women that had gotten an award other than Sally.
I'm not sure there has been, to be perfectly honest. Kent, were you and
Liz is a really good one.
Yeah.
Were you and Sarah like co-recipients? Was it?
No, I don't think it was necessarily for outdoor radio. It was for a bunch of
Okay.
stuff we were doing for invertebrate stuff
Okay,
that
yeah,
that
all right.
was leading, that why I got recognized maybe. I don't know. It's
Okay.
a little embarrassing, honestly, because there's so many people.
You'd like it to be for that, Ken. Instead of your brilliant acting.
Yeah, take 27, please. Do it over.
Yeah.
Ken went up on the Turn Islands without a hard hat just so he could get dinged by terns.
We needed the blood. Yes, we needed the blood. I would second having a list because embarrassingly, I forget who actually has been awarded in the past, and I can't recall everyone, and so it'd be
Where
nice
does
to have
that
a
list
list.
live?
What are
We
the
can,
five?
I'm just finding, so I just Googled it and I'm just finding like press releases and I
Yeah.
see that Kent's VCE did an overview of Kent's receiving it.
mhm.
I don't think this is it's just whatever
Yeah.
it's pulling up.
What year did the award start?
It looks like Kent received it in 2016 and it says it's a new award, so that must have been
So
this
Sally
brand
was
new award.
Sally got the first
15.
one.
Yeah, yeah.
I think I was the first person, and it's probably why I was given the award because nobody knew about it.
Well, we did actually give it to Sally the first year. Yeah,
Oh, okay, all right.
yeah,
It was when Deb Markowitz came,
right, yeah,
right around that time.
yeah.
Did Steve Perrin get it?
Yeah.
Steve has gotten
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Yep.
Scott Darling,
2022.
Darling.
So you
Yeah.
could pull up like, even if you don't have the
Warren-
documentation, just with the
Warren King,
Warren King.
Warren King.
Yeah. Definitely why Crow was
Ian
on that.
Worley.
Yeah.
I thought Liz Thompson got it.
It is possible.
She would be, if she
Yeah.
hasn't, she would
Okay.
be excellent.
Yeah.
All right, I will put it in my to-do list, Roz. I'll put that list together and I'll send it around, so. All right, I wanted to, before lunch, to get to the new SAG members. So I'm gonna turn it over to Jed, who's got a couple of nominees for the Mammal SAG, Chris Gray and Elias Rosenblatt. Jed, if you want to say a couple words about Chris and Eli.
And I'm muted. Sorry about that. Apologies for not having my camera on earlier. Yeah, so I just want to put forward two members. I can be real quick here for the Mammal SAG. We have a smaller group. We're probably one of the smallest SAGs, but we've got a lot of deep expertise. We are light in two areas. One is small mammals. Bill is still a member of the committee, Bill Kilpatrick, but his involvement is diminished a little. And we need someone with small mammal experience, and that's where Chris Gray comes in. Chris actually was a graduate student with Bill. He's been working as a mammologist for 14 years, mainly in working for NGOs and consulting firms. Also worked in Quebec. Much of his recent work has been at Colby Hill in Lincoln with a family forests organization. He's interested. He'd be a great asset, especially as we move into evaluating species for the Wildlife Action Plan. We need some bench here on small mammals. The second person is Dr. Elias Rosenblatt. He's an exceptional scientist. He did much of his graduate work on the Moose Project in the Northeast Kingdom. He spent 4 years up there studying moose. We don't have a lot of expertise on moose and deer, and he can fill that. He is an exceptional scientist and really tackled his work here with moose in a lot of different unique areas, stress and nutrition and genetics and population dynamics. So we think he can help provide good perspective on that front. So I'm not sure of the process here, Alan, but we certainly would put forward a motion to request that those two are able to join the Mammal SAG.
No, that's great, Jed. And I think the process is then, coming forward from the SAG, and then we'll entertain a motion in a second year from the committee. So.
I'll mention too that we had unanimous support among the SAG members for the two of them joining for both.
Right. I think it's fine. I mean, unless anyone feels differently, I think it's fine to put these two together. And I hear a motion to add Chris Gray and Elias Rosenblatt to the Mammal SAG.
So
moved.
Hey,
Second.
All right.
Wait, who moved?
Was it Stephanie?
It was both Stephanie and Brian. So big
Right. Right. Excellent. Any further discussion? I guess the one thing that I would just say, especially around Elias, is that, Bill had been giving us a lot of great general genetic advice as mammal SAG chair. So it's nice to see, as Jed says, some bench strength in the genetic realm as well. I think that's really good. So
Yeah, Chris also has some experience along those lines too. So happy to help on that front.
yeah, great. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of adding Chris Gray and Elias Rosenblatt to the mammal SAG signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Or abstentions? All right, excellent. Thank you for that, Jed. Appreciate it.
Thank you all. Thanks.
And so Savannah, I will turn it over to you. Savannah's got 3 nominees for the fungal SAG. If you want to give us a little blurb on their expertise, Savannah, that'd be great.
Yeah, hi everyone. Starting with Hannah Huber, she's actually a conservation mycologist for the state of Pennsylvania, and she's the state coordinator of the Fungal Diversity Survey Northeast Rare Fungi Challenge, which is a group that has been put together with nobody from Vermont yet, but other members of our SAG are a part of this group, working on trying to classify what's rare, threatened, and endangered in the Northeast. So although she is out of Pennsylvania, I think she'll offer a lot of insight on how we're approaching surveying for rare, threatened, and endangered fungi, and have a lot of valuable insight. The second person is Kevin Melman. He's actually a founder and owner of a mushroom farm, and he's an avid mycologist. So another great person who has some expertise on a side of fungi that we don't always think about. We think about foraging, but we don't always remember that we have this entire industry of local farmers that are interested in selling. So I think also be great to have. And then Andrew Swafford, he's a biology professor at the Middlebury College, but he also teaches and does a lot of his research on entopathogenic fungi, so the fungi that infect invertebrates. I think his background with this type of fungi is something that our group is really lacking. And also his expertise as being a professor and the outreach he's able to do with students, I think is going to be really great as fungi starts picking up more traction. You all know we have a state mushroom now, so we're getting a little bit more media coverage than fungi has in the past, and I think he's a great person to kind of have this interface and help us be more accessible to the public. And our entire group has all supported these 3 people fully.
Awesome. Thanks, Savannah.
I just ask sort of like sort of general question about the SAGs and sort of like, do we have a membership number that we're trying to achieve? I see across these different ones, different numbers of participants. What does it mean when you hold a meeting? Do we have we're not like, these groups don't need a quorum necessarily. I guess I'm just sort of trying to understand like adding new members. When do we stop?
Yeah.
Is there a size that becomes too unwieldy? I don't know. How are we navigating that? I haven't been part of the SAG, so I don't really know how that works.
I don't think we've gotten to a point where we've had one where there's been too many people. Usually it's the other direction where we're trying to fill some spots, some gaps like both Jed and
Yeah.
trying to do.
Yeah.
I guess I'll kind of editorialize a little bit though. I mean, for just a couple of things first. So the Endangered Species Committee, which we sort of unfortunately learned a few years ago, is subject to Vermont's public meeting law.
Right.
That's not the case for the SAG, so they don't have the same sort of requirements in terms of public agendas and inviting the public and having to have a quorum and sort of those same sorts of requirements that we have. So there's a lot more flexibility there. But I would say that a lot of the SAGs have had different philosophies around membership. I mean, I think Kent and what Savannah just presented here has been a you know, what I think we've called in the past a big tent philosophy where, someone like Hannah Huber maybe doesn't necessarily need to come to all the fungal SAG meetings, but if they are, have some questions about how Vermont might want to go out surveying fungal biodiversity, she would be there to give that level of expertise. And I think Invertebrate SAG has been doing the same thing. So, we really need someone who, is an expertise on, tiger beetles, but we don't have anyone in the state. So let's bring in someone from Connecticut or something like that. So I think it's been a little bit set by SAG, and I don't know that we necessarily have really good guidance around that. But I think that's fine. The SAGs can kind of do their own thing.
Yeah, but okay, that makes sense. So that
We've
not
been
everyone's.
we've been a little bit more restricted just because some members of the bird SAG have been kind of like, well, they should have worked on ENT species in the state of Vermont and so on and so forth. And we've kind of started to broaden out a little bit more from that base.
Well, and it used to be broader. I feel like back when you had Judy Peterson on there, right? She was a birder. She wasn't somebody with an ecology background, but she knew her birds and she knew bird habitats and
well, even Sally Laughlin, who had worked with bins and stuff like that. She'd overseen a lot of work, but she hadn't necessarily done it. So it does vary.
Yeah. Over time as well as among SAGs.
And obviously for some of these groups with the diversity of fauna and flora that they're dealing with, they, need to have a broader range of expertise.
Just from the Flora SAG perspective, we have a pretty large SAG. I forget what our membership is now. It's 15 or more. It's quite a few people, and they vary widely in level of participation and activeness. Most are in the region. One at least is quite far flung out on the West Coast at this point, but still occasionally provides really valuable input. So there isn't really any issue with having a larger group. People participate on whatever level they're able to, and we haven't felt any need to kick people off because we've got too many or anything like that. We, as I said earlier, we still have capacity issues, so more the merrier at this point.
Well, there is, there's the pay issue. I mean, you sometimes got to think about your budget and how much you're actually paying the SAG members.
It's just easy, zeros all around.
Can you use that for your cost share? Get more people.
Yeah, unfortunately, plants don't count in the same way for the matching. Too bad. Otherwise, we'd really help. Otherwise we'd really help build up those matching numbers.
Okay, so do I have a motion to approve 3 new members of the fungal SAG?
Yes.
All right.
Second.
Thank you. Any further conversation, questions, discussion? All right, all those in favor of adding 3 new members to the fungal SAG, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed or abstentions? All right, great. Thank you, Savannah. Thank you, Jed, for that. So before quick note before we break for lunch. So in the agenda, I cannot type my password and talk at the same time. In the agenda, we have a new document in the Teams folder, which is the list of SAG members. And I'd ask Jed and Savannah to make the updates with new members, but also to have all the SAG chairs take a look at that document and make sure that your SAG membership is accurate. And we've got, I think we're only asking for email addresses in there, right? So just new contact information is up to date for each of your SAG members, and that would be really helpful to just have that list updated. And if you have any issues accessing that document, just let me know.
So did we agree to?
You know, it's funny. I think I realized as I jumped into SAG membership, I don't think we necessarily did. So
With
I would
Chris
say
and River.
yes. Let's
Okay.
agree.
And I'm just thinking if you actually want him to show up at the
Yes.
event, you should have told him like 9 months ago.
Yeah. Okay.
So he's pretty booked guy.
Okay.
And I know he's going to France on the 10th.
Of October.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh.
All right.
And he is always booked on weekends.
Really? Okay. All right.
So
Jeez.
the sooner you let him know, the
Okay.
higher
Taking
the
taking
probability.
care of his grandkid.
Yeah.
And Leslie will kill
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what if I get Leslie to ask?
There you go. That's from, that might be.
I'm not gonna call Chris. I will call Leslie.
I think that's a good strategy.
Yeah.
him. Then you'll actually remember to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've only known him for 40.
No, I mean,
years,
it's just
so-
so dead on.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, perfect. And we will work on the nomination letter, but I think if we can get Chris there, it would be nice to have some press associated with it as well. So, yeah. And we could think about an alternative venue if we can't do,
Okay.
we can't do Dead Creek
Yeah,
Day.
yeah.
I mean, I think it would be nice to actually.
This is something that Maggie Gendron
Yeah.
did.
Saturday.
Yeah, including the press release and everything, which, and so it's always like a rush at the end. So
And we don't have a Maggie anymore. Is
we
that
don't have
correct?
a Maggie. We
Charles.
have Charles, who is here, but he's brand new
Yeah, okay,
and probably has no idea this is.
okay, all right,
So, well, yeah, we'll have to
okay.
get it on the radar quick.
All right, well, thanks, everyone. We'll take half an hour for lunch and come back at 12:42. Only 12 minutes behind schedule.
All right, nice.
That's amazing, really.
Yeah.
Have to find my way. Cafeteria's open. Yeah. I just need to grab a little something. So I gotta find my way back here.
So yeah, just a few things to wrap up here, conclude the meeting. And Stephanie, are you online?
I am.
Great. Yeah, I spelled your name wrong in the agenda. Sorry about that. You're Stephanie, not Stephanie. So, yeah, so, Stephanie, brought to our attention some conversations have been going on in the Agency of Agriculture in terms of some of the language that's being used around, noxious weeds and control of noxious weeds. And, she thought it might be something that'd be interesting to hear, for the ESC to hear. So take it away.
Yeah, great. So the agency is just beginning some investigation and work in, as you all heard earlier when I mentioned that the agency, and as mentioned by Alan, we have a quarantine for noxious weeds or plant pests. And we are looking at the language that we use in terms of those species of plants, and we want to change it on how we talk about these plants, how we manage introduced plant populations, and how we talk about their growth habits, for instance. The goal is moving forward when we communicate with the public is to use language that assigns accountability associated with the movement of plants and the spread of plant species. It's generally, it can be that these plants or the plant pests, it's not always plants, sometimes it's insects or other items, other things, but that we're looking to assign accountability in the spread of those plants and insects, so on and so forth, invertebrates, for instance. We also want to, because in many instances it's human-aided movement and spread of those species that harm our environments. We also want to use neutral and non-combative language, so not use terms like, the war on spotted lanternfly or smothering plants. These are plants. These are not combatants. And then the other thing being, we don't want to use language that implies or focuses on otherness and setting those plants apart and kind of villainizing or demonizing those plants. So the goal being that we're really most interested in protecting Vermont's environment and to not create a hostile mindset against plants and animals and insects that are within our environment, but otherwise just protect our environments. So I may not be explaining this very well, but there's lots of information out there and I'd be happy to share some resources. So one of the things that we're avoiding in our language, the term that is frequently commonly used is invasive. And that's actually, it's kind of hard because that's really ingrained in much of our minds as the term to explain those plants that have aggressive is another word, behavior and can colonize, yet another word that we want to get away from the landscape. So we're, just very cognizant of these terms and want to change the dialogue. And we actually think that these terms, just to some extent, can impact our ability to communicate with the public about how these species move through the landscape, by assigning, that they're somehow, marching forward and taking over when it's the public and human aided movement that happens. And so just using more clear terms in terms of our messaging outside of the agency. One thing, and also just using less violent language generally in our documents. And I was made aware actually by our deputy secretary and come through Emily Inouye. So from Allison Eastman to Emily Inouye and then to me, that Fish and Wildlife may have changed some of the language that they use around hunting season and using the term harvest rather than kill. So I don't think that we're like trailblazers necessarily at the agency. I don't know if anyone has any comments within Fish and Wildlife with respect to that change in the language there. But we also, the other piece that we want to talk about or we want to acknowledge is that sometimes the language that we use can be hurtful while not being intentionally hurtful towards populations of people. So terms like alien, exotic, and then again, invasive. So we're going to try to move forward with some changes. The agency is interested in engaging with partners around some of this language. Maybe if we could come up with a common language that we can all use to make a transition, that would be great. We're not, obviously we don't control words, and so we're not forcing anyone to come along with us, but we also understand within our communications that we do need to make sure that we can bring people along with us if we do make changes to the language that we use. So Emily Inouye and the plant health section are going to coordinate some meetings. And if folks are interested in participating or engaging with the agency, feel free to email me and we can, make you aware of when we plan on having those conversations. So thank you.
Thanks for that, Stephanie. One of the things that I was sort of wondering about, and it's really funny how, like the, invasive or invasive, bad plant, good plant, how ingrained that gets in your mind. And, part of me was sort of thinking as you were talking, has anyone done like some work with focus groups or surveys to kind of see whether the language actually changes people's minds in terms of whether they might take action to, reduce, whatever, buckthorn on your property or something like that. But at the same time, I'm kind of thinking, does it actually matter? I mean, we're not winning. We're not decreasing populations of any of the species that we might call invasive. They're all doing fine. So does it matter? I mean, it just seems almost like this is just the right thing to do because you can teach about these species, their ecology, you can talk about all the conditions that humans have created that allow them to thrive and do it in a way that doesn't, alienate parts of the population that think about, you're calling this plant a colonizer. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I mean, that's how we feel. We want, there's neutral language, there's scientific basis in their ecology and how they grow and their habits that, is not necessarily a harmful term. So that's exactly where we are. And then also focusing on the fact that there's accountability in that humans are, in many instances, can be the reason that something's spreading or has been introduced into the state. So we want to acknowledge that and ensure that people understand it. It's not that the plant on its own, came here necessarily.
Yeah, thanks.
So I'm curious, what's an example of a alternative term for invasive?
So we're going with introduced at this point, and then using parenthetically invasive so that people can visually see the transition. And while introduced doesn't, could be unwanted introduced, or we could use benign introduced if we wanted to talk about a plant whose habit is not aggressive. And again, I can't, and we're learning. So like, I don't have the answers, but we really want to engage in the conversation. But yeah, so currently we're using the term introduced.
Is there value in the term, for some species at least, the term invasive? Because it sort of implies the problem from an ecological standpoint that an issue creates.
There are a lot of introduced species.
Yeah, apples.
Right,
Yeah.
all of our crops.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and that's what's being acknowledged is that all of everything is introduced, but we can use other kind of modifiers that are not of an aggressive or a hurtful term, and making other. We can still communicate without creating that otherness.
As long as the message that some non-native species are bad. I mean, that's the whole reason that this committee exists, to preserve native versus non-native. So as long as you're not euphemizing, if that's a word, your terminology, that's fine. But I think it's important to get the point across that yes, we're striving to save natural communities, save native species, as opposed to non-native species. You could call it good, bad, but you know what I'm talking about.
I don't think we're going to get away from that. Like, the goal is to protect. Like, that's actually the focus, is that we want to protect our landscapes. It's not that we don't have to create the other situation or demonize a plant. It's a plant. It didn't necessarily, many of the plants didn't come here on their own. They were brought here. And so I think, again, it's the accountability, it's the and it's ensuring that our message is clear. And I totally understand where you're coming from, where we want to make sure that I mean, we have a quarantine and we list all the species out on it, and those are the plants we don't want, or the pests that we don't want in Vermont, and we don't want spread. So clearly we're going to communicate that. But we're going to try to use terms that are more neutral. And again, describe the scientific basis of their ecology and or their habits and the habitats that they thrive in.
Okay.
My understanding of if it's research or just people's investigations about people's reaction to the use of various terms and words. There's a lot of information out there, and I haven't looked at it in recent years, but the department has evaluated some of that science in the past to help us figure out what sort of words do we use to sort of get messages to resonate with the broader public. And so it's words like nature. I mean, we talk in our jargon all the time, and we rarely use the word nature. We're always talking about conservation and wildlife and all of the terms that we are really accustomed to, that most people, those words never come up in their daily lives. But so one of the words that I remember sticking out, and this was from a Nature Conservancy assessment about public perception of conservation work, was the term nature really resonates. The term protect really resonates. In fact, years ago, when we put together the landowner welcome wagon package, trying to broaden the awareness of new landowners coming into Vermont, get them to understand what it means to be a responsible landowner. The three words that came out of this assessment of what resonates with people, how do you get their attention, were protect, respect, and enjoy. And so that became a logo for outreach to private landowners to start the conversation about conservation, stewardship, sort of thing.
Thank you. And I'm happy to share some resources. I think we have a list that talks about this, and I'd be happy to share it as well. I mean, the agency hasn't done any surveys or focus groups on this, but thank you for the suggestion. That could be helpful if we had funding, but maybe there's a way we can do it. That's not super. Anyway, it's resource intensive, but certainly we are we're looking at resources regarding this conversation. We don't believe we're alone. So thank you though. And
no, I know what this is a conversation that's happening nationwide with a lot of groups. So there might even be other folks that have done sort of this analysis to look at, because I don't know that Vermont would be, you could probably take some data from elsewhere and see how those words, it would just be interesting. That I think there is that tension of, it's important to change words, not to disenfranchise certain groups of people, but also to make sure that there's like an action part of it, that an urgency, I guess.
Seems like neutral language, when I'm sitting here thinking about this, neutral language sort of invokes a neutral response.
Yeah. That's can be
Language
the
is
problem.
really, and words are really about, trying to capture what it is that you're trying to convey.
Right.
So that's why we have a rich, diverse language. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was kind of getting at.
Yeah.
An aggressive language hasn't gotten us anywhere.
Well, that's true.
We have not successfully, decreased.
No, but that's sort of beside the point. It's not really the language, right? I mean.
Well, I don't know. Is it beside the point? I mean,
no, the point is that these species are still able to, colonize areas or whatever word we want to use, right? They're successful.
Yeah.
Right, that's the word.
Yeah.
But if you started using the word successful, right, put an example right there. Okay, successful to me sounds good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what language is all about. We want to say that they're not, we don't want to feel like it's a good thing. So just because it's not a good thing, why do we have to call it, why are we trying to call it a good thing if it's not a good thing?
Yeah.
Right? It's just, putting lipstick on a pig doesn't make it not a pig. Right?
Yeah.
Quote
Sarah,
yeah. Always you quote her once a day.
You do use.
Always.
What would Sarah do?
You don't want to know what words she would come up with.
Now she's suing. I don't know who she's suing. She's suing somebody.
Well, I welcome more. I'm taking notes. I welcome more comments and I appreciate your time today.
I have a good example with fish, and I fully support the changes, but I wrote a paper with Alan Marsden on the fish and fisheries in Champlain a number of years ago. And I did a lot of historic digging, and non-native fishes first became known as vermin fishes, and then trash fishes, and then forage fishes. And then this was like 1940s and 50s. And then non-native or non-game fishes came out. And so there's a progression there of about 150 years of how terminology changed for the good.
Yeah.
But it indicated more of an objectivity rather than a subjective, like vermin fish. It's the stuff is the literature is really colorful reading.
The words have different meanings in different times. Right?
Exactly.
Vermin in the 20s might have evoked exactly what the sentiment was.
Mhm.
I mean, people were living with, gases all the time.
It would have been more.
They were water back.
Right.
I mean, Kylie, you maybe know this, didn't, wasn't it Linnaeus who characterized reptiles and amphibians as like creepy and loathsome or something like that?
Oh, I can't remember the exact language, but it wasn't flattering.
Yeah. Okay, well, Kent, I'm glad you're still here. I mean, I wanted to switch into new business. Oh, I was gonna ask Stephanie, I don't know, Stephanie or Roz, I sent you that article on the so you didn't look at it.
Just
so-
brought it up just now. I have
Okay.
not had a chance to read it yet.
Well, I guess I was just wondering, I don't know if you looked at it, Stephanie, if it's worth sending that out to the committee or not.
I did. I didn't read it entirely because the way it has loaded the PDF, I have to keep every page I turn, I have to rotate it for some reason. So
You can't rotate
it was a
the
little
whole
long.
thing. Okay,
It is
all right.
Okay.
Okay,
But I
Never
will,
mind
I'll
then.
review it. Yeah, I'm gonna read it because I want to share it internally as well. So
okay. I was just gonna say, I could send that out to the committee, but if you guys haven't looked at it, I won't bother. Kent, I think we had been talking for a while about potential funding through the Lake Champlain Basin program, and that RFP just came out. Kent and I had just sort of a initial conversation because Secretary Moore has mentioned several times that she thought there would be a really good opportunity here to fund some mussel work. And I don't know, Ken, while you're here and Rich is here, I'm also wondering, is there an opportunity for fish work? But I kind of feel like we should try to do something in terms of submitting a proposal that if it just gives us baseline data in a couple of river systems or something like that, it just feels like we can't just go on with not really understanding some of the status of some of these endangered mussels. So since you're here and you're online, I thought I'd just bring it up again, and I'd be happy to help in terms of trying to put a grant proposal together. I know nothing about best practices for mussel sampling, but I thought that I don't know if it was 2 lampricide treatments ago, you brought in some folks who were had done some research. Was it in one of the southern rivers? I can't remember for sure, but it seemed like you've got some folks on your team who know what they're doing and potentially have some good ideas about how we might get some better data.
Well, for ISAG, there's now a mussel working group within ISAG of a bunch of members, and I think they already have a little bit of funding that they've been doing from the Lake Champlain Basin program to do general mussel surveys and research of areas of different places. And I've told the group many times that this is out there for their taking if they wanted to put an application in. And I guess they already have a lot of work, and so they haven't really said like, yeah, we're going to write another one or something like that, because there's a few of them. There's not that many people working on mussels.
Yeah.
But I could reiterate to them again that there's this money there. One of the things that has always bothered me that I mentioned, that maybe I mentioned to you, but I meant to mention to you, Alan, in a email message recently, which is at one point, like, I'm not a mussel person at all, but at one point I realized in the ISAG meetings that part of the problem was like either someone in the ISAG had to remember something about the mussels and we're like, oh, there was a report about that one time, or we didn't know, right? Because it was all the data is in former paper or scanned reports, and there was no database of like who has done surveys where on mussels, when and how.
Yeah.
And so I got a tiny grant. This is going back maybe 7 or 8 years ago to start to figure out how to digitize all that stuff. And I did. And then it was such a tiny grant, I ran out of money to like go back with Mark Ferguson and others that had piles of these reports, literally piles of them, of like scuba diving or wading or all kinds of different methods that were done on all the different rivers and lakes on monitoring and inventorying mussels, and to make it all digital so that everything was captured, the exact location, how they did the survey, the date it was done. But the idea is that one, that data would be at our fingertips so we could actually look at it. But two, the real reason I wanted to do it was in one place where we could go back and say like, hey, you know what? No one's done that stretch of river for like 25 years. Like no one's gone back and looked at what has happened or any changes or anything. So you could actually go back and repeat what was done historically and see if there were any changes and start to look at it that way. And so that would be something that I'd be interested in doing, is to try to create, and this is happening right now. There's surveys going on right now where everyone says like, oh yeah, I'll make sure the data is made so that it's publicly accessible, and then it never is. And so I would be really interested in doing something like that potentially, trying to find money to make sure we create a digitized database of mussel sampling events and keep feeding it as we go along too. And then using that as a springboard for figuring out like, okay, what haven't we sampled a long time and what do we need to sample and how? But that was one idea I had for going into the future. But of course, there's a million ideas of what you could do with mussels and fish populations, which are the hosts of mussels, so they're really important too.
Yeah.
So here, if I could just interrupt.
Yeah.
So Michael Smith, who is on the Invertebrate SAG, and Paul Marangelo, this few months ago got a Lake Champlain Basin Program grant to survey the lower portions of the tributaries going into Lake Champlain this summer and into next summer. And so they're doing that. It's a 1-year piece. I don't know if that's enough to cover everything for this one snapshot, but hopefully
That's
we'll
what
have
I was
some updates.
That's exactly what I was
soon.
referring to. Yeah.
Yeah. Ken, if you want to reach out to them, why don't you copy me? I mean, I'd love to have a little bit better handle on just what's going on. I mean, I don't want to be the
well, and also
let me, are, but yeah,
no, that would be great. And let me also see when, we go on a little bit of a hiatus in the summertime because everybody's out doing field work and whatnot. But let me find out also from them when the next subcommittee meeting is going to be, because it would be, if you're interested and available, Al, or anybody could join the subcommittee meetings too.
Okay. Yeah.
And that would be great too. So let me escalate that tomorrow and copy you and see if I can find out what's going on and we can get an agenda going fast.
Yeah. Okay.
Is Mark Ferguson involved in any of this, or?
Totally. Yep.
He is. Okay, because he can connect with sort of the regional picture too. Regional priorities.
I can't remember who's exactly on the subcommittee, but there's on the subcommittee is even people that aren't members of the SAG who have joined the subcommittee. So it's like it's SAG's. It's like the SAG is accidentally being like the Endangered Species Committee and having our own little group that tells us what we should do. In a way, it's kind of weird, but it's just that inverts are so big that it's like we just had to have a subcommittee for this. It was just too much.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess I would also say, Ken, and again, I'd be happy to help. Maybe if it does seem like this is good for now, and, the Basin program has got funding RFPs every year, then maybe it makes sense to put something in for digitizing records and try to get some more money for you and VCE.
Yeah, I will email Michael Lou Smith and others tomorrow and copy you and see, because I don't know what the schedule is for the next meeting. It's probably going to come up soon since the field season's wrapping up.
Yeah.
And maybe I could push it so that it's sooner than later, and we can. It'd be great to have you join in a little bit as much as you can, and anybody else that wants to too, and see where they're going with their discussions, and then see if it might fit in better with getting a bigger grant or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. That was all that I wanted to touch on in new business. Any other things that folks want to talk about?
Do you want to do that endangered species permit? Did I miss that?
Bumblebee.
Bumblebee.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Bumblebee. Dang. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we still got a quorum. Yeah. Sorry about that. I just totally skipped it. So this is I don't know, I guess I would say it's sort of an interesting permit application. I don't know, Kent, if you want to talk a little bit about it, the yellow banded bumblebee.
I could, yeah, I can.
Okay.
It's an interesting one because it's this permit is asking to collect bumblebees to take them into captivity for a threatened species. What's the common name? Yellow banded bumblebee.
Yellow banded, yeah.
And take them to Ohio for a captivity work to learn how to make them resistant to a important disease they get. Sorry, is there something?
No, it's just that there's a meeting next door and it's hard.
It's a party. It's a party.
Yeah, it sounds very fun over there. We're having a hard time hearing you. I think Roz is playing down the law.
Anyway, so they put in so the bottom line is that this species is in the same subgenus as rusty patch bumblebee, which is federally and state endangered.
Crushing
and extirpated from Vermont. And so the idea is they would want to use this species, I think, as a surrogate to learn how to better raise bumblebees in captivity and to knock out the effectiveness of this parasite that they both have that is probably responsible for their demise. And so there's this species is only somewhat common. It's not even common. I wouldn't even say that. This species is only in the northern New England states and New York is probably the only place you find reasonable populations of this bee right now. It's basically declined drastically everywhere else, including here too, but less drastically here, I guess. And so they probably came to us because they had a contact for a farm here, probably. And number two is they probably felt like they could collect enough queens here to take into captivity. And so they wanted to collect 20 queens in the springtime before they were establishing colonies and grab them and take them into captivity from one farm. And so there wasn't much discussion for ISAG, to be honest with you. Almost everybody in the ISAG that discussed this was like, yeah, this is fine. And the reason they thought it was fine was because to solve the problem for this subgenus, which all the bumblebees in the subgenus have the same problem, you're going to have to do this eventually to figure out how to get rid of this parasite and actually raise bumblebees then to reintroduce them back into areas. And so it kind of felt like it was just a sacrifice worth doing 20 queens to do this, which, for that area, 20 queens might be kind of a lot, but it's only one little spot. And so we said yes. I was going to say we reluctantly said yes, but we didn't really. We just said yes. But we did have a few questions that might be asked of this, which is like, hey, you know, Vermont's taking a hit for this. When you come up with a method for reintroducing Bombus affinis, rusty patch bumblebee, we should be a beneficiary too, not just like the Midwest and stuff. So maybe we'd be considered for a reintroduction program sometime for the endangered species that we're missing now. And two, you know, we wanted detailed records of everything they did. And then I guess a couple concerns we just had two concerns. One was more of a comment and a concern. Like a lot of us felt like finding 20 queens in the spring that before they create colonies was probably a high bar. I'm like, you're not going to find 20 queens in one farm, but go for it. I mean, maybe they can. Maybe they know where there's a good wintering area for them. It might be hard for them to find 20 queens in one spot. And then the only other real thing that we came up with was like, that's actually more plentiful in northern Maine. Like, why are you coming to Vermont to do this? Like, why don't you go to Maine and get them where it's not endangered and not threatened? And there's more of them, and maybe slightly more of them in northern Maine than there are here. It was a minor thing, but it was like, why Vermont? Like, and why not somewhere else? I'm sure Maine would be like, why not? Why here? Why not Vermont? So, I don't know. But we reluctantly said, sure, you could do this, and we think it's overall probably would help towards a solution for this problem of this subgenus.
Yeah, Kent, I'll just add that when I checked with the applicant about that question, they said their intention is to collect in multiple states and hopefully in where a central Canadian province too, where they're not listed and certainly more plentiful. They say their goal is to capture a wider range of genetic variation.
That makes sense. Okay.
Whether that's enough to overcome just, you know, any collection in Vermont, I'll leave that to you guys to decide.
I mean, if I was trying to create a captive population, I'd probably do the same thing. So that makes sense, actually.
Yeah.
I guess a question in terms of what we, the ESC, put on the permit conditions. So, I mean, you just, in the SAG advice, you kind of just say 20, it seems like you might not be able to capture 20. I guess, I mean, I'm kind of thinking about like a contingency plan. Is it worth the ESC saying anything else about it? I mean, like you're saying, we reluctantly said yes to 20.
You know, about at one location.
I mean, yeah, I'm like wondering if they had to spread out to get their 20.
Right.
Would that still be okay with the ISAG?
Is the permit saying that it has to be exactly at this location, John, or?
The application specifies the location.
Morgan.
Haven't drafted the permit yet. I want to hear from you folks first.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yes, so the permit could just say you are authorized to collect at this specific location. We could say within the county, we could say broader, but we could just say, you know, this location and that's it.
Well, why not just in the state? I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what I was getting at, Ken. I mean, were you thinking, oh, there's no way they're going to be able to get 20 at this one spot, so we'll just say yes? Or 20 is okay if they can get them?
No, I think we thought 20 is fine.
Okay.
And we were just,
right.
I think we were just politely putting a warning in there as people who went out and looked at these
right.
like, whoa, finding 20 queens before they establish colonies in one place might be a high bar just physically to do.
Okay, good. Yeah, so I mean,
You know,
I think
keeping in mind that a lot of these queens that they're going to grab, I mean, I don't know. I always hate to say this, but a lot of them are probably not going to be successful anyhow. I mean, it's just bottom line; they're not going to be. So,
yeah,
it is a little bit significant that, in a good way, that they're taking queens before they establish a colony, because a lot of those probably aren't going to establish a colony and are going to die anyhow. Which is weird to say. I mean, I don't know, but For some reason, it makes me feel weird to say it, but it's true. I'd like to say they're all going to be successful and fine, but most of those queens are probably not going to be.
Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking about a stupid joke, so never mind. We'll move on. I guess I would say I would be fine to say within the state of Vermont. I mean, obviously they've got to get permission if it's going to be on private property. But and it sounds like they must have a relationship with this farm. I don't know if it's like the, family farm or something for the PI, but anyway, so any other questions or discussion?
Ken, if the permit were effective across the entire state of Vermont, are there any locations in the state that you know of where the population would be less robust or more sensitive, it should be excluded?
No, that's a good question. I don't think there really is. It's I mean, that's because this species was hit by a disease and other factors, it tends to be a lot more common in colder areas. So either higher in elevation or colder biophysical regions in the state. But you can find it across the state, and it's not like, if you take some here or there, you're going to change anything in that location. I think it's fine to do it anywhere, really.
Okay.
I mean, I just would reiterate again that the exciting thing I think about the whole idea is this is like one of the cogs in this whole machine of helping maybe fix the problem with this subgenus, which includes rusty patch bumblebee as well as this one. So I actually think it's not like they're just doing this for like some paper or something you want to publish. I think this is an important part of the whole idea of recovering rusty patch bumblebee and this bee in this subgenus.
Okay. Do I have a motion to, I guess, approve the permit application with the, I guess the one change from the invertebrate SAG's advice we would open this up to collecting anywhere in the state of Vermont. So moved.
Second.
Any other comments or discussion?
For all your time on this.
All right, all those in favor of the motion with the friendly amendment signify by saying aye.
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 All right, it's unanimous. Barely held on to a quorum. All right, thanks for that, Kent. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other new business or anything else anybody wants to bring up before we adjourn? All right, thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thanks. Thank you, Alan.
Thanks, Al.
Good
Yeah.
day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks,
See ya.
everybody.
See you, Kent.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah.
See you, everyone.